Take me home tonight. I don't wanna let you go to see the light. Take me home tonight. Oh shit. Just like Ronnie said. Be my little baby. I paused because I was gonna let you finish it, but it's alright.
Oh no.
Hey, have you ever heard of the secular perspective?
Um, I think so. Sounds familiar.
It might sound familiar because it's so fucking catchy. This is a project that me and a friend were working on. We haven't been active since January because there was some stuff going on in his life
I
that kind of like destroyed it. Um, but I was thinking about potentially starting that back up as my project rather than his. If I do that, then I would need some people to help me with like managing it, but also hosts. So if I end up doing that, would you be down?
I mean, it's definitely something that I would, like listen to the details about and see if it is something, I mean, just kind of depends on logistics and stuff.
Yeah. We should have a call about it or something at some point.
Yeah, it sounds good to me.
Hell yeah. Hey, Sacrificial Lamb, what's up? What is it? Why is this all the way over here? Oh. Sacrificial Lamb is ready for bed. But the night's young and we're just getting started, so you better lock the fuck in. For everybody who's just getting in, thank you for coming. Thank you for the early taps. We do have somebody who's requesting up. Hey, toxic misogynist. Are you at least 18?
Yeah, I'm 30.
What god do you believe in?
Oh, the Christian God.
What's your best evidence for God?
Yeah, miracles that's been performed in my life. So actually, let me get the pictures right now so I can show it to you.
A miracle?
Yeah, a miracle.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's not going to do anything for me or for Ogar because this is something that you experienced. We weren't there.
I mean, it should, right? You ask for evidence, I provide evidence, right?
No, you saying that a
that's
miracle happened doesn't prove that a miracle happened or that a miracle happened would be
what
evidence for God.
I mean, a picture like that. I mean, a miracle proves God exists, right?
No.
Because it's supernatural and unexplainable.
No,
my
it doesn't
concern
prove
would be
that God
that
exists.
I mean, well,
say
I
my
guess
my
like this
concern would be
miracle I
that
have proved God exists because we just prayed for the person and they got healed. So that's right there. That's not scientific. That's spirit. That's supernatural.
Wait,
So
are
it
you
proves God exists.
are you a troll?
No, I have pictures right here. I'll show you. Give me a second. Let me
my,
get
my
up here
issue
real
with
quick.
this is just that there's going to be people with other belief systems that you disagree with that are going to have the exact same kind of situation where they can say like, "Oh, we did whatever our religion says we're supposed to do, and this person was healed." And we have medical evidence that they were healed, and
Okay,
like if
here
that
it
doesn't
is.
prove that their
I
religion is
my,
true.
my my job is to provide a proof of burden. My burden of proof is to provide evidence of miracle. So I'm doing my part. Okay, so here it is. All right, so here's what happened in miracle. Let me do it right here and zoom in. So this woman right here, she's being prayed over because she has difficulty walking. As you can see, she can stand. See how she's being supported right there because she can't walk on her own. So after we prayed for her, she was able to walk and stand on her own right here. And you see her right here with the wheelchair she came in
Mm-hmm.
because she herself couldn't walk before. She can walk on her own. Her husband that's her husband right here having to move around in that wheelchair. And then, like I said, yeah. And then here's her after she got prayed over. After she got prayed over, she's fully healed and standing on
Yeah,
her own.
that's really unfortunate. People who are like in wheelchairs and are like coerced into standing up because of like an emotional event that's
Like
occurring
serious.
in a revival or something. This is like something that's not recommended by their doctors, right? People will do irreparable damage to their legs for standing when they're not supposed to stand because they've been like tricked into something. I mean, do you know this woman?
Oh no, that's the best part. I don't know who she is. I was in a
Oh.
prayer conference and
That just
I
raises
just
the
watched her
likelihood
just
that
do
she
things.
was an actress, because that is a real thing that
But
happens with these things.
but you don't know that, so you have to. I'm the one that was there firsthand, so technically I'm more credible
Well,
than you are in this
you
case.
don't. Well, but what I do know is that there are
Is that
literally actors and actresses that will come in fully capable of walking to things like this, get prayed over or get hit with a blanket or some other dumb shit, and they'll stand up to help fool people into believing this stuff. And like you would be the person who would be falling for that if that's the case. Now I
well? I
wasn't
mean,
there,
like
but you also like that's why I asked, do you know this person? Because that would raise the
yeah.
credibility a little bit for me.
No, actually, it makes it more credible because it's not someone I don't know. So I don't have to say, oh, it's for a person that I did for my bias. No, this is completely unbiased,
No, if
random
you
person I
because
saw.
if you did, what I'm saying is that if you did know her, then you could know how long she's been in the chair, what her condition is specifically, and if she's still walking around and jumping and skipping for like ever since, like she's not in a wheelchair ever since after that.
That's a personal problem. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is just to, hey, I just saw it happen right there, take a picture of it to make sure no one will say this is fake, and I done my part. I
Yeah,
don't have to
this is
that's
escalate to
very
that point.
very weak evidence.
No, it's good evidence. He just
That
want
just
to
brings
prove
us
it, which
back
is
to where we
fine.
were before.
It's
It just
fine.
brings us back to where we were before. This is like even worse than what I thought you were going to show because, like I said earlier, you know that there are tons of different religious traditions out there that you disagree with that would have this exact same kind of evidence because what Lobes was both of the things that Lobes was saying are completely true. That people will, because of like the adrenaline and the scenario that they're in, and maybe even social pressure, will stand up longer than they are like their body can handle, and they will do damage to themselves. Or if nothing else, like best case scenario, they're just back to normal function the next day because it's again there was just like adrenaline and stuff they can stand up. And then there are when you go to like meetings like this, people will bring in actors and do stuff like that just to like make everybody have a great experience. So you come back and you know pay the entry fee again next time or whatever, or if it's not an entry fee, then you donate or whatever. So like yeah, I mean this
But
same kind of thing exists in
you can't prove
all other
that.
religions you don't agree with.
No,
So
no,
I know.
it's not
it's already
Either
been
way,
proven.
I
It's
bring
already been
empirical
proven.
here.
Like not the
No, no,
specific
no. But you
scenario.
don't know. You weren't there. You weren't there, so you're lying if you say it's true because you weren't there.
Are you shitting me? Like, did you even hear what we just said? I
I'm
don't think
saying
you
that
heard
you guys are
anything that we
assuming
just
things
said.
that's when you guys weren't there, so you guys aren't being empirical. You guys just say, okay, it's a proof. It
Do you
is.
deny that what the scenarios that we described happen?
I mean, they happen, but not in this case because you guys weren't there to prove
How
that.
did you rule
So
those
in this
out?
case, you have to
How did you rule out that it
because
wasn't somebody who was standing when they shouldn't be standing, or that it was an actress?
I watched them the whole time. Like the husband was literally taking her to the restroom because she couldn't walk on her own.
But
That's why they had the wheelchair right there.
that's the point. Like, if they were an actress,
I
then that would
know.
be part of the act.
I know, but since I myself was there physically seeing it and I couldn't believe it, I have physical
Holy
evidence.
shit!
But since you're not there, you have to pretty much agree
Holy
with me
shit!
because you weren't there essentially. Like it's like saying the moon landing was fake.
Do you
You
have
don't know how the moon
anything,
landing was real.
toxic misogynist? Do you have anything that's actually substantive? Do you have anything that's actually
This is literally
evidence?
empirical evidence. Like I don't
No.
know what you're talking. This is empirical
I've already
evidence.
given a very good rebuttal because it's just that
Yeah, no,
weak.
but it's a lie because
The fact that
it's
you
a lie
can't
in
see
this
it is not
case.
my problem.
It's false in this case because you can't prove it. You can prove in other cases, but it's false in this case because you can't prove
You
it.
didn't
So it's
rule
like,
out the scenarios that I put forward. Hey, thanks, Bertram.
I know, but I'm talking about my scenario, not scenarios before. I'm talking about my scenario. You have to agree that it's true. You have to agree to my scenario because you can't prove it's false.
Nah,
You
do
can
you
other scenarios that have been
do you
proven
have
false.
anything else for
That's the
this guy,
case.
Ogar?
No, I mean we're just at the point where he's literally saying that unless you can prove me wrong, I'm going to continue believing it, which is him admitting that he doesn't care what the evidence is.
I mean, I literally gave empirical evidence. That's how it is in court. I give empirical evidence, and
All
I
right,
say
see
this
ya.
is true.
Let's bring up a good guest. Well, I hope so anyway. And guys, I did get that restriction on Monday, so it's taken a little bit longer to get the algo beefed back up. So make sure you're tapping the screen, make sure you're engaging with the comments, make sure you're sharing the live out. You can hold your thumb on my face and a list of people should pop up and you can spam the shares that way. Do whatever you can to get some more butts in the seats over here, eyeballs on the screen. The more people we have in here, the more conversations we can have, and that's why we're here in the first place. Gnarly Dogs is still trying to connect. Gnarly Dogs, if you're still there, I'm gonna drop this. If you're still there and you want to come up and talk, then just request back up and I'll bring you back up. So I had a pretty long day at work. What about you?
No, I had a pretty chill day today.
It must be nice. Yeah, I work in a wholesale warehouse. So we've got like the holidays, like the Independence Day shit coming up, and everybody's going crazy. Oh
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, see, I sit at a desk.
that must be nice. I mean, there's pros and cons to sitting at a desk.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Hey, is it Aegis? Is that how I pronounce that?
Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Hey, you least 18.
We've met before in Discord. You joined like Christian server or something.
Oh, I was what?
A few days ago, you joined like a Christian Discord server, and
Mhm.
we've actually met.
Oh, well, thanks for being here. What's up, man?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just going to listen first and then probably like respond if there is anything I disagree.
Okay, well, so let me just first get your age. You're at least 18, right?
Yeah, I'm actually 25, 26, 25. I was born in 2001.
Seems legit. Okay, and you're Christian?
Yeah.
Okay, what's your best evidence for God?
I would just like identify. I would just like identify as theist.
That's fair enough. What's your best evidence for God?
Well, sorry, I was like outside. So my best evidence for God, I believe in like the teleological argument and also the intelligent design argument.
It sounds like the same argument. So do you want to lay it out and we'll discuss it?
Uh, I would just like listen to your objection to it, since
Well,
I think like
there's
probably
different formulations that
well,
you could give. So give your preferred formulation of it, and we'll address it.
well, yeah, okay. So first of all, we know that the world exists, right? And the world is like intelligible. You know, our there are like certain rules in the universe that are like consistent and stuff. You know,
Yeah.
and yeah, we know that like for a lot of a lot of things in the universe, you know, this kind of like laws of physics and the other stuff. It does, if there is like no creator or no intelligent, this that like grounds it. It doesn't have to be that way. The fact that it is that way and it is consistent, right? We can trust science to know about these rules. We can trust that the data of the past can give us like prediction about the future. Proves that there is something that is like conscious and intelligible, that gives existence towards like all the conscious things that can know the universe through experience.
Well, there isn't really any evidence for that. But as far as the constants being constant, we just observe that they are. We don't really know exactly why, or if they will always remain constant, or necessarily if they always have been. I mean, I think we're pretty sure they always have been. If our models of deep time, as it stands right now, are accurate, then it seems like they would be pretty consistent, at least in the past. But we don't really fully understand why they are consistent. I think to jump to a conclusion, to posit God being the reason why they're consistent, I think that would just be fallacious.
It's not jumping to the conclusion. It's just that out of like all the options out there, you know, if we define God as something that is like uh in uncaused and also like conscious and you know like rational, and from him like everything from him everything comes into being, then that existence, that being, God itself, out of all the other alternative option, is actually the most reasonable one. I'm not jumping into the conclusion that it is like
Well,
we cannot for
I mean,
certain that
it's
it is
making up an answer.
It's making up an
Whoa,
answer.
I got some major echo. It's making up an answer from incredulity. You could make up anything that just fits the mold perfectly of the thing that you're looking for, but you don't know if that thing is actually the culprit. It's like if have you ever heard like the butler did it idea? Um,
perhaps
so like if you're watching a whodunit and somebody is, let's say somebody was killed, um, maybe somebody posits that the butler did it and they're certain that the butler did it. Um, you could say that, but there's no evidence that the butler actually did it. Furthermore, there's no evidence of a butler even existing. Like there's no character called the butler. There's no butler in the movie at all, and everybody looks at the guy who posited the butler, being like, "Wait, what butler? Proof that this butler even exists. How could it be responsible for this murder? We don't even know if there is a butler. What's your evidence for that?" And the person positing the butler might say something like, "Well, you guys don't have an answer, so the butler must be right. Like it must be the butler, this thing that I made up." That seems to me like what people do when they posit this teleological
notice
stuff.
notice that I never said that God must be the only conclusion, right? So I'm not arguing that like the teleological argument gives like a certainty for God, but it gives like plausibility for his existence, right? And like
No, I think you're kind of missing the critique a little bit. Like, I think that you're basically just trying to define, like, if you're looking at a problem and saying, like, I don't know what's responsible for this thing, like, I don't know the answer to this question, and then you just define something into existence that fits the answer you're looking for, that doesn't mean the thing you've defined into existence actually exists. So, like, what Lobes was saying is, like, if there's a murder mystery happening and you're trying to figure out who the killer is, just because you've seen, like, heard of butlers doing that in the past doesn't mean that in this situation there is a butler and the butler did it. Just because you can define, like, oh, the butler is a great murderer who, doesn't leave evidence and is really good at getting away with it, that's why we don't have any evidence and we don't know who did it. It's like, okay, well, you don't actually have a reason to believe in this person, so you shouldn't be, saying they're responsible for a thing that you don't know they did. And it's the same thing here. Like, you're just defining an answer instead of finding an answer.
well, but in that case, it is inevitable that you can define what a killer is, and you know that from the evidences that the person died. It looks like it doesn't die a natural death. Therefore, if we define what a killer is, uh, we can know that uh, the killer exists, right? It doesn't have to be the butler, right? I'm not arguing for a specific God, but I'm arguing that a form of God exists, or at
Right,
least
like
it's plausible
God would
that
be
he
the
exists.
butler though. Like just whatever, like, not a non-specific God would be the butler in this scenario.
Why
Because
it
the
would,
butler
why
isn't
God
like
would be
Dave the butler
but
or
not
like Alfred, right? I'm not saying it's Alfred the butler. I'm just saying the butler. Like just like we're not
But
saying
why?
Yahweh God, we're just saying God. It's still
Yeah,
analogous.
but why God would be the butler, but and not the killer? We take we define what a killer is. We look at the evidence that somebody died on a natural death. Therefore, a killer is a plausible explanation that the person is dead, right? Why
Well,
can't we do the same thing with like
it would be a little
universe?
bit. I think it would be a little bit more analogous if it was like somebody who might have died from natural causes. In fact, it almost certainly died from natural causes, but somebody wants to say that there was an agent involved. That's more like I think what we see with the universe, because I think that it's pretty obvious that it arose from natural causes. If it even had a beginning in the first place, it seems like it's all completely natural to me. So when somebody says that there has to be an agent involved, I just don't really see the reason why. I think that nature perfectly, or not perfectly, but very well suitably explains the phenomena that we experience around us.
Can you explain that a little bit? I have like voices in my place because I'm on the road right now.
Yeah, don't listen to
Sorry.
the voices in your head, man. So, all right, so yeah, sure. So, I think it would be more analogous if the butler in this murder mystery was just dead, but it was likely from a natural cause, but somebody's positing an agent being involved, a killer, right? I think it'd be more analogous to say that because it seems to me like the universe is just natural and doesn't have any kind of agent guiding it or directing its path. So I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that there's an agent that's responsible for the universe's existence or the way that the universe operates, because it seems like it's just natural processes. And until I see positive evidence for that, I'm not going to really be able to get on the same train as you.
Well, but we can know that the universe have like natural processes because we already have an assumption that we can trust our senses to begin with, right? Otherwise, we cannot like go to that conclusion. We have to trust the past to give like an accurate data about the laws of the universe. Therefore, we can know that like the universe has a certain law. Therefore, like it emerged like from natural processes.
And don't you think that's like reasonable though? Like
And
that's what I mean.
and
That's
and
what we
and
both have.
and also like the fact that the universe comes like from a natural processes doesn't real doesn't really contradict theism. You know, like you can just say that God exists as the first mover, but like uh, in his like divine essence, he already has the laws of the universe, and he started the universe according to what he already have in mind.
I mean,
You
you
know,
can you
and
can
and
posit
and
God as you posit God as whatever you really want to, but the burden is to like demonstrate that the way that you've described God is accurate to reality.
okay. Is there like any objection that you have towards like any religion specifically?
I mean, like, yeah, it just depends. Like, I think that the Bible, for instance, is pretty egregious with like God's morals and stuff. I think that it's also like painting a picture of a very illogical God, both like in description and in the way that he acts. Um, yeah, and that's the one that I know the most about is Christianity because I was a Christian for so long. But I mean, I've got just like an issue with the metaphysical, like God in general. Like the philosophical idea of God seems to lead to logical contradictions in almost every way maybe even every way that I've heard it described.
Okay. What kind of contradiction? Let's like uh, keep religion aside for a sec, even though I'm the one who asked it like in the beginning. But I'm just wondering what contradiction if we are only like talking about the general idea of God, like the
It's got a
philosophical concept
restriction.
of God.
Yeah,
What?
seems like you're just getting like throttled down. I don't know what's going
Yeah,
on.
those not eligible for recommendation is restricted in search results because your live does not comply with our For You feed eligibility standards under our community guidelines. Reason: hate speech and hateful behavior.
What?
Live discontinued in some regions. It's not appropriate for
Who?
some, restricted for some
I'm sorry.
audiences.
I do not follow.
Yeah, I got a restriction. Um, Guys, give me a follow if you haven't already. I wanted to do a restart anyway, just to see if it would, even though I had just begun. That's why I didn't do one, because usually like I'll get to at least a 60 people range really fast, and I've been like barely getting 20. So now that I have a restriction, I will just do a restart. So make sure that you guys are following me, and if you want to come back, Aegis, I'll bring you straight up if you want to come back,
Okay.
and we'll continue the conversation.
Okay.
All right.
Peace.
Yep. Easy, man. All right, guys. I'll see you soon.
If a man
Whoop. Whoops. Didn't mean to click that. What's up, man?
Yo,
Yeah, I don't know what's going
be less
on.
hateful. Yeah, don't be so
Yeah,
hateful.
yeah, man. Like,
You and all your hate.
I
All
think
that
I'm
hating you were
probably
doing.
one of the least hateful, most calm people on this entire app. Like,
Yes,
not,
well, I mean, look at look at me and what my lives are like.
I know they're like, whoa, man, and you'll like blow up.
I
Um,
haven't in a while, I don't think.
no, I don't mean like, I mean like your numbers will blow up.
Oh. I thought you meant like me
Well, you'll
like
do
getting all
that
mad
too.
because that's
You'll
happened
do that
before.
too. Like, you'll do both things. Maybe I need to start like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Maybe
start getting all aggressive.
maybe I need to be a little bit more aggro. I mean,
Yeah, that's clearly
people
the
like
strategy
watching
everybody
that.
should do.
People do like
Well, I
watching
don't know.
that.
I mean, look at the most popular people on here. They're not aggro at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Not usually.
I keep telling myself I'll be calmer, and then I start talking to people.
Yeah, and they just push your buttons. Yeah. Well, anyway, hopefully this works a little bit better this time. If God wasn't real, how did everything start from vibrations when nothing can make a vibration? Vibration is sound. Um, yeah, I don't think that there was ever a zero state of energy in the universe. Trip ships.
There's also vibration that isn't sound, because sound is just vibrations in the air.
Well, it's like vibrations through a medium, because they'll say that like sound travels, I think, better through something like water or even like the
Sure,
ground.
sure, that's fair. Yeah,
We
air
just
wasn't the
usually
right
we
thing.
just usually hear it like through the air. It's like obviously the most
Right.
like understandable. through the air.
Let's just put it this way. Sound is just the vibrations our eardrums can detect.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Mark came up and teacupped. Hey, Mark, are you at least 18?
Yes, I am.
What God do you believe in?
The Christian God. I'm an Eastern Orthodox Christian.
Okay, what's your best evidence for God?
Yeah, I have a reductio of the atheist worldview, so it's just going to be a true dichotomy that God exists or God doesn't exist. So if you take it to be the case that God doesn't exist, then you're committed to an atheistic paradigm, which means that logic can only be in one of four categories, ontologically speaking. Nominalism, logic is just some linguistic token that you made up. Conceptualism, logic is just a mental particular in human minds. Physicalism, logic is reduced to physical states of affairs. Or brutalism, where logic just is what it is. And none of those are coherent options on the atheistic paradigm. They're exhaustive. So would you like to take a position and defend it?
I haven't heard of these different types of logical frameworks.
Yeah,
Okay, so let me ask you, do you take logic to be?
Mark, what you need to do now is show the contradiction in each of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
The contradiction in nominalism, physicalism, and conceptualism is just going to be very simple. They all three reduce to the same problem. If logic is a concept in human minds, and human minds are particulars, then logic is a particular. That's the first problem with nominalism. I'm going to get to why that's a problem later, but they're all the same. Under nominalism, logic is reduced to a linguistic particular. Under physicalism, logic is reduced to a structural world indexed particular. It's just a feature of this world. Under all of those three accounts, if logic is reduced to a particular, then logic can never be necessary by definition, because particulars are contingent and not necessary. So no inference rule can necessarily follow, because the inference rule is going to be a particular. So if the inference rules are particular, then you have no coherent basis for counterfactual reasoning. It's impossible. Because in order for you to counterfactually reason, you have to posit some world where X maintains its identity condition across modal profiles. But in order for you to do that, you have to assume the invariancy of the inference rules. But particulars are not invariant across worlds unless you posit some universal or some universal agent that allows it to contain its identity condition.
No,
but
there
if
doesn't
you're
need to be an
positing some
agent.
universal
It's a totally
not
valid
an agent.
atheistic.
Sorry, not an agent.
It's a totally
I
valid.
didn't mean to
atheistic-
say agent.
Okay, but what I'm trying to say is that it's a totally valid atheistic position or non-theistic position, or whatever. Like, you could hold this position as a theist, but a position that doesn't involve a god, you could easily just be like some kind of ontological or ideological logical realist, and just take the position that that there's some metaphysically privileged structure to reality, and that the one true logic is just simply the logic that most accurately describes that whatever that metaphysically privileged structure of reality is. So you
Okay, how do you have access to it? How do you have access to it, and what is it?
Well, the way you have access to it is just by investigating the reality that you find. So if you think that reality is
Does investigation require inference rules?
I'm sorry, what?
Does investigation itself presuppose valid inference rules?
No.
Okay, how do you know when you're making an inference that the inference is warranted?
Yeah, I think you're going to have to do some kind of Narathian kind of procedure where I don't think that you really have any other option. But what I'm saying is that it
Epistemic
doesn't matter.
inevitability doesn't grant normative justification or warrant, so that's just going to be a category.
Well, we're not talking about anything normative right now. What I'm saying is that if you hold to any kind of position that is that reality has a fundamental structure, whether you think that reality is fundamentally made out of objects, or you think reality is fundamentally made out of states of affairs,
What's
or
your position?
whatever
What's
that
your
position is, you could
What's
take
your
that position, and then you
What's
could
your
say
position?
that because there is this
What's your
metaphysically
position?
privileged structure to reality, there's a particular it
This
can be
is sophistry.
described in
This
a
is
certain way.
sophistry. What's your
And
position?
so what I'm saying is that you can easily hold this view without needing
All right,
a
which
God.
view do you
So
want to take?
your
Which view do you want to take?
that it's not
Which view do you want
possible
to
to
take?
have
Which
any
view do
kind
you
of
want to take?
meaningful view about logic's ontology without a God is just wrong.
Yap, 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 yap.
You know, he
We
wouldn't
take a
he
view and
wouldn't
defend it.
consider it yapping if you'd actually listen to what the fuck he was saying.
He's not taking a. I'm listening to what he's saying. What he's saying is a red herring with regard to my argument. My argument requires you to take a stance and defend it so I can show you on this particular stance entails some contradiction. Now, if you move to this stance, here's another contradiction. This
Well, that's
stance,
why
another
Ogar
contradiction.
said that
So I
you
need you
should
to
just-
take a stance.
Ogar just
I
said that
need you
you
to take
should
a
lay out
stance.
why there are contradictions in each one, because we might not know what stance we should take. Like when you
Yeah,
list
not
out
only
these,
that, I'm just-
these ones, I didn't even know what a lot of these were. Like the brutal thing, I didn't know what that was.
That's the thing, is like I'm just describing to you a non-theistic view that you could take about logic, where you would even consider it to be, like objective, and you could take a logical realist position that doesn't
not
require
gonna do
any theistic entailments.
I'm just not going to grant. I'm not going to grant any of that unless you take the position and defend it.
All right. Well, this is you just burden shifting at this point.
That's not burden shifting for me to not
it is.
grant your posit. It's not a burden shift.
No, what you're making the positive claim that there's no way to have logic without a God, and then
What you're doing is
demanding that we
whataboutism.
defend a position.
All I'm saying is when you say there could be some position. All right, can you tell me
I
the
just
position?
described a position.
Okay, what under this position? What kind of thing is logic?
I just described it.
Some object?
I just described it.
Can
You
you
weren't
give
paying
me the
attention.
kind?
I don't know what
Yeah,
to tell
go
you.
ahead.
Nobody wants to listen to me say all that bullshit again.
Sophistry. This is sophistry. Okay.
Yeah, definitely sophistry.
So let me
I'm
just
so sorry that I've
let
actually
me
read
just
shit
finish
about
my
this.
let me finish my argument. Okay, so if you take nominalism, conceptualism, physicalism to be the case, logic becomes a particular. No inference rule is necessary, and thus it's just going to be the case that you can't justify any counterfactual predication because that's going to assume the invariancy of the inference rules. But you can't justify the invariancy of the inference rules if the inference rules are particulars. So that's the problem with that. Predication is not possible, or counterfactual predication is not possible under nominalism, physicalism, and conceptualism. If you take brute realism to be the case, brutalism, logic is what it is. Well, that doesn't tell me what logic is. That's just going to be making a numerically identical. It's just going to be predicating numerical sameness with logic, right? Logic is itself. Also, it's going to make logic epistemically inaccessible, right? You could just say that if it's a brute abstractum, then it exists in some way that's different from the way that other particulars exist, right? So that's going to be positing a realm which logic occupies, which
This is
agents who are using logic does
if
not
I was
occupy.
yapping, this is yap. Just give the direct contradiction. Like give the P and not P that is entailed from each view, every view, and then give the demonstration that this is an exhaustive list. So just give the P and not P for each view first. Please.
Yeah, so I already said that already said earlier for the three other views I just mentioned that counterfactual predication is not possible. Counterfactual
give the P and
predication
not
is
P.
necessary.
Give the P and not P.
Yes. Logic requires counterfactual predication to justify the semantic identity condition of predicates across usages. So if you don't have that, you can't justify any positive inference.
I didn't hear a contradiction.
I'm saying that there is a problem. I didn't say that necessarily entails a strict modal contradiction. I'm saying you run into a problem.
Are you just using buzzwords?
No.
Seems like it. What's the
Yeah,
alternative?
I mean,
If this is
Yeah,
the
theism.
exhaustive list on the what's the logical grounding from a theist perspective?
Yeah, logic is just going to simply be how God operates.
What does that mean?
So it's going to be a mode of God's nature. So I'm an Orthodox Christian, so we believe that God is comprised of essence and energies. And by comprised, I'm not saying like he's composite or something like that. I'm just saying this is how God is. So God's essence is going to be that which is transcendent, simple, non-composite, and unknowable. And God's energies are going to be the modus operandi of that essence. And it's how God is known.
Well,
So
if
logic,
it's just how it is,
logic,
then let's just say logic is just how the universe is. Boom, we're done. We're on even footing.
no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm
It's
saying
exactly what you
logic. That's not what I said.
It's just
sounded
what God
pretty,
is.
like, I mean, it
No,
sounded like the same.
that's
'Cause
not what I
if
said.
logic is just like, I
So-
think it was your brutalism thing. Like, if logic is what it is, then it doesn't really tell you much. But then, like, if logic is just how God is, it feels like it's the same thing. But like, we at least know the universe exists.
No, so you're not understanding my position. One, because you didn't let me finish it. So let me finish. God's mode of operation is not a brute fact.
Yeah, you need
It's a
to
super
using the
essential.
buzzwords and just dumb it down so like a normal person who doesn't like you subscribe to your cult can understand it.
I'm worried about
Okay.
the chat.
Yeah. Okay. So when we say that, when you make a brute posit, brutes are just going to be ungrounded.
Just use the normal words. Just say the same
Stipulations.
sentences, but with the normal words. You don't have to like
Dude.
give the definitions. Just say the sentences with the normal words.
When someone says something is brute, it's just going to mean that the thing that they're positing is brute has no derivable properties, no grounding relation.
Yeah,
It just
this is
simply is. It just
lots of
simply
LARPing.
is. It's not LARPing. It just
Yeah.
simply is. So it's a free floating abstractum out there that has no grounding. That's
you're just
simply what a
using
brute is
buzzwords,
going to
man.
be.
You're just using
Not-
unnecessary
Can you shut the
buzzwords
fuck
that don't
up?
do
Can you
anything
shut
for
up,
what
dude?
you're saying.
Can you shut up? Why? Why isn't that?
Can you actually like say something of substance?
Why is what I'm not saying of substance?
Because you're just using random buzzwords to try to make yourself sound smart.
Okay, how does that follow?
Because that's what you're doing. Why can't you just use normal person words to describe the
Poll the
concepts that you're
audience.
you're
I am
talking
using
about?
normal person words. You're not understanding. Just shows some intellectual deficiency on your part.
Gotta go to the store and get some more intellectuals because we running out. I'm doing a poll, guys. Oh, never mind. He left. Cool.
Yeah, it was just buzzwords, man. I mean, like he said a modal contradiction. And like he's using all these words in places that like we weren't talking about anything modal.
Well, he came in. It sounded like he was. It sounded like he was seething from the very beginning. But maybe that's
Yeah.
just how he talks. Some
Yeah,
people just
and
like have
saying that Sailor's
RBF.
right.
Some people just have like RBF. I think he has like that, but like with his voice, potentially. But then he's also like, it did sound like he was just using buzzwords. I mean, yeah, this person's not connecting. Let's try somebody else. And then I'm gonna have to get up to do something real quick.
Well, Lube's is getting a beer. Yeah, Lube's is getting a beer right here. Didn't you hear that boy Lube's is getting himself a note of beer? Yeah, so you should get one too. I said it's beer time. Yeah, it's beer time. Whoa. Flippity flappity flapping door below. Bitch. What kind you get?
What's up, guys?
Ooh, that shit looks good.
Who's playing music? Is that you?
Baby, yo. Bitch.
Hey, what's up, yeah? Are you at least 18?
Yep.
What god do you believe in?
The Christian God.
Alright, well, what's your best evidence for God?
My biggest evidence for God is this question. Do you believe you're smart enough to be an atheist?
Yeah, I think you could be the stupidest person in the world and be an atheist just by default.
Okay. So, well, you have to be smart enough to come to some sort of conclusion for your worldview, right?
Nope, I don't think so.
Nope. Okay. So you're saying that it's possible that you're just dumb and you cannot get to some coherent conclusion for God's existence.
I think that like if nobody ever posited God, then everybody would be atheists, but nobody would know that that was what they were because there wouldn't be a word for it, right?
Wait, how would you know? How would you know they would be atheists?
Because they wouldn't believe in God because nobody's posited God.
I mean, you would have to show like some type of like sociological paper. Like in anthropology, I believe it shows that we like societies, they have some form of God in some way, shape, or form. Like religion, wouldn't you say that religion is evidence for God?
Well, I'm talking about in like a possible world where there is nobody who's posited God, like throughout all of human history.
What? How would you know? Like, what makes that possible?
Because it doesn't break any of the laws of logic.
Oh well, I mean, dude, you would obviously have to ground the way you use your applying logic.
Holy shit.
What?
I think that I'm answering the questions very like fine. What's with the what are you doing?
What do you mean?
Yeah, start over. Let's do it in good faith this time.
Oh well, the way you're applying logic, right? It begs the question. When you say, well, it's possible that there's gonna be a possible world where everyone's like some atheist.
I was giving a hypothetical. I'm saying that like if it were the case that nobody had ever posited God, then we would all be atheists because there wouldn't be a concept of God for us to believe in.
How do you know that?
This is like trivially obvious.
No,
It's literally defined.
trivially, so that's just begging the question. You can't
No,
say
it's not begging the,
you
do
can't
not
say.
understand what a hypothetical scenario is?
Well, the hypothetical scenario has to be possible at least, right?
Oh my god.
No, the hypothetical scenario is explaining like what if this would be the case, then that would be the case. So like obviously we can understand what it would be like. Like it's just we're saying that it's conceptually, it's like epistemically possible that you could have a world where no one had ever come up with the concept of God as we think of it now. Obviously that's epistemically possible, and so if we imagine such a world, we can easily say, yeah, definitely in that kind of epistemically possible world, people wouldn't.
How is that
have any
possible?
level of
How?
intelligence to not believe in a God because they wouldn't even be aware of the concept.
How?
How? Okay.
You,
Dude,
well,
I
you
told
would
you,
be.
like, I
You
told
know,
you to be in
the thing
good
is
faith.
that
if you are being in good faith, then you might just
no,
be turned
I'm
into this
so good faith.
conversation.
I'm so good faith. But here's my point. I'm gonna get right to the substance. When you say that if nobody came up with the concept of God, everyone would be atheists, then that would be like the hypothetical, right?
Yeah, because nobody.
Correct.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
okay.
nobody would be a theist, so they'd all be non-theists or.
Okay,
atheists.
because you're saying that we invented God, right?
I'm saying that like we would have to have a concept of God in order to believe in God.
Yes, and that concept comes from what?
It comes from our brains.
Our
This has nothing
brains.
to do
So
with
we are create. So this is where I'm saying that you're begging the question, right? If you're assuming the atheist position in your epistemology to make that hypothetical, if we invented God, then your hypothetical is
No.
absolute. Is
No,
wait, hold
this
on,
has
hold on.
nothing to do with
It's
it.
absolutely
This has-
possible.
No, this is.
But it
this has
wouldn't
nothing
be
to do with it.
possible because even if we didn't come up with the conception of God, how do you know that there would not be any evidence for God? Unless you would assume your atheist framework.
What I'm
This
saying
is
about-
all completely irrelevant anyway. This is a total red herring.
Yeah.
No, this is directly. This is your
every-
epistemology.
Every concept that exists in our mind that like we know about exists in our minds. Like even if it's like this can right here, I understand the concept of this can, right? But that exists in my mind. It does exist, but it's still a concept that I need to actually have in my brain in order to believe that it's there. So God could exist and us have no concept of him, and we would still be atheists. We need this concept to manifest in our mind in order to believe. And if we don't believe, then we're not believers, ergo atheists.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, well, we could have a concept of God not existing, but God can still exist, right?
No, like I'm saying, if we don't, what I'm saying is that if we don't have any concept of God whatsoever, then we wouldn't have the word atheist, but that would be like, that would fit the description of what we know to be as an atheist. Like,
Okay.
there isn't a concept of something like a Schmergelplop, right? The Schmergelplop, you've never heard that before. But you would be like an
No.
Schmergelplopian, right? But you didn't know it because nobody ever posited the Schmergelplop to you before. But there's nobody that believes in that thing. So we're all Schmergelplops, Schmergelplopians, or whatever the fuck. Because nobody's ever like thought of it before. If nobody had ever thought of God before, then we would just be atheists.
Well, nobody. Okay, so let me entertain your hypothetical. How do you know that that actually disproves the existence of God?
It doesn't.
Like, if you were to give that, it doesn't. Okay, so
that doesn't. That's not what it's meant to do.
Okay, it's meant to
The
just-
reason why we're talking about this is because you said you have to be smart enough to be an atheist. I said no, you could be like really stupid to be an atheist because you're an atheist by default. Before you have a concept of God, you're an atheist.
like non-belief in God. I mean, I would agree to an extent, but then to say that, to also say, like, I would agree to an extent, but to also say that if we didn't come up with the concept of God, therefore we wouldn't have some sort of like, this guy mentioned like epistemology like 3 times, epistemic access to like the commitment to believing in God. I don't think that would follow.
Yeah, like
Because-
once the idea of God is posited, it has the burden of proof.
Yeah, well, yeah. That's a good point. So I would say that unless you're arguing for like some theistic God, then I think your hypothetical is compatible with theism. But when it comes to I'm arguing my religion here, the personal God of the Bible, and my religion, I don't believe that's how it works.
It's still theistic.
Yeah, the thing is that there's a difference, right, theologically, because God is personal and He makes Himself known
It's
to all
still
creation.
theistic though. There's no difference.
Oh,
It's just more
well-
specific.
But the specific, me specifying it matters, because I'm saying that what your argument is compatible with deism, but it's not compatible with the God of the Bible.
Yeah, so
That's what
now
I'm
you're
saying.
doing what you were accusing us of earlier, and you're just assuming your position and saying, because I assume that my position is true, then this other scenario couldn't possibly happen because I'm already assuming my position is true. It's
That's not what I'm doing.
It's still on
I can
you.
tell you what I'm doing. I can tell
It's
you what I'm
still
doing.
on you to demonstrate that your God actually exists, which is what you're supposed to be doing instead of going down these like rabbit trails of red herrings.
Yeah, I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm saying that your point of the hypothetical attacks strawman on my position, because
Okay, so
I don't
just
believe
give the
I don't believe,
demonstration that God exists. Like, this whole thing has been a rabbit trail to nothing. It's like a wild goose chase for a goose that doesn't even exist. Let's just get the actual argument, the evidence for God.
Yeah, for sure. But going back to the hypothetical, right? I'm gonna answer that in the second part. I said I'm gonna answer that in the second part. Stop with the giggling. Answering the hypothetical is a great argument against a deistic God, but not a great argument against what I'm trying to present to you, which is the classical
It's an
theistic
argument against
biblical
anything.
God.
It was never an argument against anything.
Yes, it was.
No,
It was
wasn't.
a, it was a
an answer
response
your
to
question.
it was a response to if you're not smart enough to be an atheist.
Yes,
But
there
then he
was an
said that
answer
if
to your
nobody
question.
came
it
up,
wasn't an argument for anything.
A question
Well,
is
his-
not an argument.
well, it can be. In this
No,
context,
it's
God.
your point is compatible against a deistic version of God.
It's compatible with any any deistic or theistic version. I consider
No.
theism to be a subset of theism.
I mean, you can consider anything to be a subset of anything, but then obviously they have their logical constraints.
And
Deism,
now we're just going to
theism,
run down another
open
rabbit
theism.
trail instead of getting an argument for God.
Wait, I'm just
Yeah,
helping
here
the
we go
guy
with
out.
Ogar on this one. Like, can you
That's fine.
give a propositional evidence or argument?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I believe God exists because of the historical life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Okay, why would Jesus existing and resurrecting get us to God? And I would love to. I would, or you could give some evidence about this resurrection. Actually, no. Go with my first thing, because even if he resurrected, which I don't think he did, how does that get us to God? Because that's where we would go next after that, anyway.
Or even if he resurrected, that would literally justify you in believing that he is who he claims to be. Not only through that solely, because we don't only look at the resurrection and you say, oh yeah, Christianity. No,
explain.
we look
explain
at
the
we
claim,
look
yeah.
at we,
No, yeah. You ran past it. Don't
Well,
run
well, the
past
thing-
it. The actual
well,
question is, how does? Wait, hold on.
dude.
You tried to run away from it. The actual question is, if he resurrected, how does that get us to God? Don't just say it does get us to God. Explain how.
Yeah, well, because in the context of this conversation, I'm giving you conjunctive case, or by conjunctive
No,
evidence,
explain
like
the resurrection. Explain
encom-
how the resurrection gets us to God. This is so easy.
it would reconcile us back to Him. But that's I'm describing the
It would what?
internal. It would reconcile us back to God because
It would what?
we're
What is that word?
reconcile us.
What? I have no idea what that word is.
Are you saying reconcile?
Yeah, reconcile. Yes.
That has nothing to do with what. That's assuming that
obviously,
God exists.
yeah, but you set the criteria for how I should answer, and I told you.
No,
let
no.
me finish.
You're assuming that God exists. I'm asking you.
Well,
how does the
I don't-
resurrection
dude.
get us to God?
Wait,
Don't just
point-
assume that God exists.
This is
and
a
say
red.
because
This is
God
a red
already
herring
exists.
because even if I answer that,
Oh my
it's
God.
not going to get to the substance that which I'm trying to present. I'm trying to present it.
substantive. Like, because that's the
Oh, well,
point.
I'm
like,
trying to
you're
present
saying
something else.
Your evidence for it is the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And I'm
Yep.
saying that, like, even if he lived, died, and resurrected, like, what's the connection? Like, how does that get us to the conclusion that God exists? This is
Yeah,
like,
well, it would
directly
be.
relevant.
Yeah, but he only mentioned the resurrection. You only mentioned how does the resurrection reconcile us back to God. But that's not the case that I'm presenting. I'm presenting a collective case. Not only his resurrection, but also the messianic prophecies, his life, teachings, death, and resurrection.
To my understanding, he
That
doesn't
being a
fulfill any of
direct
the
ex-
messianic prophecies.
You said, what's my understanding?
I said, to my understanding, he doesn't fulfill any of the messianic prophecies.
How? How do you get there?
Well, I know that one of them was that the Messiah was supposed to be born of the line of David, which Jesus was not, and he was supposed to sit on the throne of David and rule over Israel, which Jesus never did.
And where do you get this interpretation from?
From the Bible.
Not an interpretation.
It's literally
Yeah,
what
it's
it
just
Bible.
what
says.
the Bible says. Yeah, it's not
Well-
an interpretation.
Well, the thing is that the Bible says many things, but what it means, we also have to look at what makes something compatible with the other, if it's the case.
No,
For
that's like-
example,
words don't
uh,
mean what they actually
That's like
mean.
assuming univocality. That's when you get people trying to jam square pegs into round holes because like
Yes.
things don't like work in unison. But if you assume univocality, that's when you have to do what you're saying and try to make them fit together. But like if it doesn't make any sense, then these things that don't fit together should be the evidence of that. This is something, what you're describing is something that only people who assume it to be univocal and true do.
Yeah. But what I'm not doing is that I'm saying, hey, this is conveniently, like if I just give you this interpretation, this is convenient with my position. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is that the progressive revelation in the Bible is self-evident, and typology in the Bible is self-evident. For example, Genesis 3:15, where we see the seed of the snake, which is sin, but then the enmity, God will put enmity between the snake and the woman. The woman, we don't see the name Mary, but we can see that this is typological for Mary. This is prophetic for Mary. Mary was, well, because the way it came to be, because of the way it came to be.
But like,
How
what
do
do you
you
mean
know?
how?
Yeah, so typology and progressive revelation, we can see that when God promised that he will put enmity between him and the snake, you know, the seed of the snake is sin, but the wait, I forgot that part. Wait, there's this argument that I had, but I'm in the preliminary stages of giving it, but here's how it goes. Since there's typology in the Bible that you can draw parallels to, like the seed of the snake, which God promises enmity between him and the woman, so that the woman can deliver the Lamb of God, the one that's going to redeem the world. We can see that taking place in the New Testament. So then, when you say something is a prophecy, we can see that by direct prophetic context here.
Because something in the New Testament is in some way consistent with something that also happens in the Old Testament, that doesn't make the thing that's in the Old Testament a prophecy or an allegory for something to come.
Well, unless it's explicitly stated that it's a prophecy.
Well, sure, if it's
Did you say
like
that?
explicitly stated that it's a prophecy, then that's at least something. But prophecies,
Okay.
like prophecies, are predictions of the future. And if you have a vague prophecy and it kind of comes true, if you look at a scenario a certain way, that's like very unconvincing.
I
But
think
what
this
are
is
you gonna
specific,
talk about
though.
specifically? Yeah, which one do you want to talk about specifically?
Mary, the Virgin Conception, or like Isaiah 7:14. Let's say the Virgin Conception, for example. I believe in the Greek Septuagint,
Hey, Lobes,
they were.
I gotta get rolling, but I love you, and I hope you have a good rest of the live. And everybody,
Love
take
you
care of
too,
yourselves.
man. Everybody give Ogre a follow. He goes live like 5 days a week.
Oh God.
Nice music. Is this your music?
Oh God.
Yeah, so you said Isaiah what?
Isaiah 7:14, I believe. This is off of the top of the dome because I don't have a Bible with me right now, but
Okay,
Isaiah
that one,
7:14.
that one says, "Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel."
Yeah.
Uh,
So that would be an example of prophecy, right? Because it's
Right.
explicitly said for it to be the case, especially how the Jews even look at that interpretation in the Greek Septuagint. Greek-speaking Jews translated the Old Testament to Greek in 100 years before Christ was born, and it was written as a virgin birth, and then the virgin birth happened. So we can see that this is a direct example
well,
of a
this
prophecy.
doesn't say that it was
coming
a
to be.
virgin birth. It says a young woman is with child and shall bear a son. Should call him. So like this is saying that the young woman is currently with child and shall bear a son and name him Emmanuel. But Jesus is not named
Yeah.
Emmanuel, and obviously Mary is
No.
not with child at the time of the writing of this.
But here's what's interesting. Emmanuel, first of all, the Greek, not the Greek, the Hebrew for young woman can also mean virgin, and the Hebrew for Emmanuel also means God with us. So look at the irony here.
Is Jesus ever called
Um,
God with us?
No,
Because this seems
he
like
is God
a
with
major
us.
post talk. Hey, where's Cyber? He was talking about the translation of this just last night, and how the Septuagint.
Mate,
how
what's
the
pulse talk? Can you
Septuagint, like
what's
mistranslated or
Pulse Talk?
something? Can somebody send this to Cyber? I want to see if I can get him in here because this is a topic that where he would be good to talk about.
Oh, he would be good to talk. Okay. What's post hoc? Like, can you define that? I'm a bit lost in the terms here.
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's like when you make a connection based on something that you already know. Like for instance.
Oh,
good
like where I
example.
assume my theology.
It's like it's something that just like happens after the fact, right? Let me see if I can get a good example. I can't think of one.
No, I think I know. I get what you mean. I'm saying that it happened because I can connect the future event to the past event, right? Like I'm using the future event to justify the past event when the past event
Oh.
could have meant something else. Maybe is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like an everyday life example is that you wore your lucky socks and then you aced your math test. The post hoc claim would be I aced my math test because I wore my lucky socks.
Yes, I understand that. But the case that I'm making is not. I'm not saying that Mary had a virgin child, like she was a virgin, had a child, and Jesus was God. Therefore, this connects to the Old Testament. No, I'm saying based off of the expectation of Isaiah 7:14 among the Jews, on how they looked at it, and what the words directly mean. When it comes to their interpretation, we can see that the prophecy actually came to be fulfilled by virtue of number one, it being explicitly, contextually a prophecy, and number two, 100 years before the birth of Christ, 100 AD, I believe the Greek Septuagint, Greek-speaking Jews was translating the Hebrew Old Testament to the Greek Testament, Old Testament. It's written as virgin in chapter 7, verse 14.
Yeah,
And then
that would
Emmanuel,
probably
God
be
with
a
us.
mistranslation though. I don't know how you could, because I think that if you had somebody
Look at the Hebrew.
who was a virgin who gave birth, I don't know how you would
Yeah.
ever prove that they were a virgin, because like when somebody gives birth, that's the proof to me that they're not a virgin.
Typically, I agree. Yeah, like that's the ordinary means, right? It would be you would get cognitive dissonance when you say, "Oh, you're a virgin, but you're having children." Even Joseph had the
Right.
same
I mean, I'm
reaction.
sort of wondering like how they would even like if I think that if they were to say that she was a virgin, it'd probably be to like it's more reasonable to me that they were trying to cover some kind of shame, like somebody who wasn't
Like what do you mean?
Joseph impregnated her, but that's like gonna bring
Oh,
upon some shame to her and Joseph, so they're
yeah.
going to just like pretend like that didn't happen, say that she was a virgin and it was immaculate
Um,
conception or some shit.
I mean, what if anything, right? But I mean, I would only make
That's
such a
just
case
like
where only would.
way more likely than like positing that God raped her. Like that's
I mean, it would be likely, like I understand you make less assumptions, but this case would be likely in virtue of the evidence, though, because to come to such conclusions without having some evidence that these guys were just making schemes of like, let's make it seem to be the case that it's going to be a virgin, and therefore, 100 years after, let's have this woman named Mary, who is from the line of David.
well, she isn't from the line of David.
Oh, really?
No, Joseph is from the line of David. That's why Jesus is not from the line of David.
I believe they're from the same tribe. I'm not sure. I seen a video on it, but
Well, it's talking
I'm gonna.
about- I mean,
due to my
regardless of
ignorance
whether
here.
they're from the same tribe, I don't know if that's true or not. But like, it gives the lineage twice, which I think that there's actually discrepancies between those two. I think it's in Matthew and in Luke. And they're different lists. They got different names. on it and
Levirate
stuff,
marriages.
but they go in order like from I don't remember who it starts at, but it ends up at Joseph, and that's supposed to be like the big mic drop.
Yeah,
of
and the
how
other one
Jesus
ends up at
is
Heli. Yeah.
from the line of David. But then it also is trying to say that Joseph is not the biological father, so Jesus wouldn't have anything to do with the bloodline of David.
Yeah. I mean, if it is the case that it's prophesied in the Old Testament, according to Isaiah 7:14, that he would be born of a virgin, according to the Greek Septuagint, 100 years before Jesus was born, then we can't ever make the case that he had to be born direct. He had to be the biological son of Joseph, because he was going to be born of a virgin, according to the prophecy.
No, so what the reason I was saying this is post hoc earlier is because when you read the verse, I'll just read it one more time. Therefore, the Lord Himself will give you a sign. Look, the young woman is with child and shall bear a son and shall name him Emmanuel. I guess some translations might say born of a virgin. Now later on, there's a story where someone is born of a virgin. Oh well,
Yeah.
this must be what this was talking about. But obviously, the people at the time had no idea that somebody many years later was going to be allegedly born of a virgin. Especially,
No.
I think this is something that's like in Matthew.
No, they were, I believe. They were. The Greek Septuagint is what they had in the first century. That's what Jesus was learning from.
I know that Matthew rattles off a whole lot of
Mark?
prophecies. No, I'm talking about Matthew, because in the beginning of Matthew,
Oh, okay.
there's a list of prophecies that he allegedly fulfilled.
Yeah, Matthew. Yeah, his goalpost is as it is written, and he mentions a lot of Old Testament prophecies.
Yeah, but he also
Um,
makes some up. Let me see if I can find one.
Okay.
Let's see.
But when it comes to because I think your case, right, when it comes to your contentions about this, would you believe that there would at least okay, instead let me ask you this question. Do you think that there is some sort of deceptive like ritual, like cultish like planning and scheming here when it comes to these prophecies and Christ bringing them to pass? Do you think that there is some sort of that being involved?
Well, I don't know. I just think that there's something that's just wrong about it. I think whoever wrote Matthew wanted to make Jesus the Messiah, so he wrote all these things down because he had access to this.
Okay.
He's like, I'm gonna make him fulfill this one. I'm gonna make him fulfill that one. I'm gonna make this one up.
Yeah.
I think that's in there, but he was wrong. I'm trying
Yeah.
to find.
How do you know? How do you know that was his? Okay. We first have to get to the verse because but
Where is that?
I mean, I wouldn't
Let's see if
expect Matthew to invent something. That's fine. By the way, I gotta go in like 3 minutes, so
Well, I don't. I
It's
can't-
just
Hang on, let me see if I can find the. Let me search it real quick.
By the way, I want to preface that when I first came in and I said, "Are you smart enough to be an atheist?" That was a joke.
Oh yeah,
it wasn't
dude,
meant to.
Like people will say like the craziest shit and be serious. So like you got.
It was.
if you're walking
it wasn't
in
meant
with
to
that,
be
I'm not
real.
gonna get it. Okay. I think I found. Let's see. U2. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling Judah in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and after being warned in a dream, he went away to the district of Galilee. There he made his home in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. In quotes, he will be called a Nazarene. That's what I was looking for. That isn't a prophecy.
Okay.
That was never said at any point ever in the Old Testament.
Yeah. So. Oh, okay. I think I've heard of this before. I think there's this saying that Nazareth is one of the worst places that you can arise from, especially if you're expected to be a prophet. Because Nazareth, I believe that there's an Old Testament saying that he will be born in a land that is despised, and which thus leads to, I guess, the contentions between him and the Pharisees. There's a collective case for this. I cannot give you the exact verses, but when it comes to that specifically, I just want you to, for this to be a thought. There are descriptions in the Old Testament where it describes that he will be born in a land that will be despised by
Right.
the
Well, when I hear
surrounding
that though, when I hear that response, I just feel like this is like
post hoc, maybe.
Well, it just feels like apologetics, like somebody who's like got to justify the position somehow. Like, how can this make sense? I think that if there was a passage that said he will be called a Nazarene, then it'd be literal. But since there isn't one, it's like, well, we've got to make it fit something. And if there's something that says it'll come from a place that's like undesirable or something, I feel like Matthew would have fucked up in not quoting it directly. You know, if that's what he was trying to say. But it seems like he's got an agenda in here because he lists off a bunch of prophecies that he has allegedly fulfilled. Like he's beefing them up here.
Yeah, what I'm not doing is I'm saying, that sounds like you make a good point. Let me find some sort of passage in the Old Testament that can probably reconcile it as some form of apologetics. But what I'm telling you is that I myself am not fully knowledgeable on the topic of that point of the Nazarenes, of him being called from Nazareth, because there was only a point where I saw the point where there was a description in the Old Testament that was meant to be prophetic about the Messiah or the future coming prophet or the Son of Man, that he would be born in a place that would be despised, he is despised. He was despised by his own people, wasn't recognized by his own people. This is like in flying colors in the Old Testament. What I'm not doing is I'm saying, no, I'm just giving you this point to justify it. No, because I myself am ignorant on the fullness of the details of that. So that's my admission.
It's just that the thing is there are potential natural explanations for these types of things. I think that if he's supposed to be someone who's despised, that's pretty mundane. Most people are despised by at least somebody. Now if he fits all of the prophecies, even prophecies that were not included, it seems like there is some kind of narrative that's trying to be
I wouldn't. One thing that I wouldn't grant, despite not knowing the fullness of the details, is that there definitely wouldn't be a prophecy in the New Testament that's not recognized or parallel to the Old Testament. That I have to stand firm on, and of course, while being open to correction or,
look into the
maybe
Nazarene one. I think that because I
want to look into that.
I could think of off the top of my head.
I'm going to look into that. With that said, I'm just going to conclude this here. Thank you for the conversation, man.
All right, yeah, have a good one. Oh, man. It's good beer. Okay. Gonna play some jams. Guys, thanks for being here. I'm chilling here, Lives the Absurd. It's got nobody in the guest request box, so it's wide open. If you want to come up here and have a conversation with me, give your evidence for God, you're welcome to. shoot a request and I'll bring you straight on up. Thanks for all the taps so far. Jerry Berry. Jerry, what are you drinking right now, man? I love some heavy ass music. Yeah. Yeah, we're currently at 3,000 likes. We can get to 5. I believe in us. So we can definitely do that. Garage beer still nice. Is that the name of the beer, or is that the brand? Jerry and I are beer drinking buddies. Play a little singing music. Yeah, the rule is I only have to sing if y'all fill up this meter, and you only have 4 out of 3,000, so I don't think it's happening tonight. Okay, somebody come up. Satanic music, that's right, Hail Satan, baby. Brand nice. I think it's really funny when people hear metal and immediately call it satanic. That's really, especially because if there's one thing that Christians are good at, it's making metal music. Yeah, I remember being scared of music. I remember being scared of music too, Rainbow Ghost. Yeah, there's all these things that you can't listen to. Why are all my shits popping down? When I did that co-host with Paper Cut Out of Theater, all my settings got like fucked up. I'm a bobblehead. If nobody comes up soon, then I'm gonna do another restart. Oh, we got somebody who's requesting. Hey, you seek pain? Are you at least 18?
Yeah, I'm at least 18, bro.
Okay, what god do you believe in?
I personally believe in classical theism.
Okay, so no specific religion, just like a general theistic idea.
Oh no, classic theism would tie into like Christianity specifically.
Oh, that's my bad.
It would just be the theology I hold to.
Okay, so what's your best evidence for God?
Yeah, so in order to provide that specifically, right? Best here, like it would have to be subject to your understanding of it, right? So like if somebody else asked me what my best evidence for God was, and they held best to be something which is like material and doesn't actually have anything to do with the topic, I would just tell them carrots, right? Something like that, and that would be considerably the best evidence to them, right? So in that same way, you know, in which how evidence subjectively that criteria we hold to, what would be the criteria you would hold to as, you know, best possible within the criteria of evidence?
Sure. So it's probably not going to be something like physically empirical, right? Since God would be a transcendent being, I don't think that we could get like physical evidence. Usually what's compelling to me, the most compelling to me at least, is some kind of philosophical argument. That's generally what gets the most traction around here. So if you have some kind of philosophical argument to demonstrate the existence of God, then I would love to hear it.
Yeah, but that right there doesn't really tell me much, right? You kind of gave me a category or like a tool to work with, right? But what would be the best way to exercise that tool? Like, for example, if somebody was like a solipsist in front of me, you know, like something like solipsism, which it is a form of philosophy, I'm sure you probably wouldn't accept that because that would reject logic. Whereas somebody who is solipsist could possibly find that to be the best possible evidence for them. So I'm asking, like, Within what system are you holding to specifically?
I want to make sure I answer your question accurately, but I don't know if I understand it or not. So like, are you
So
asking
like
for
I
like?
could give you a philosophical answer, I can give you philosophical evidence technically, right? But it may not be good enough to reach your criteria, right? So what
Well,
would I have to
that's okay.
demonstrate
Like,
philosophically?
I mean, I just like I mean, I doubt that it would fit the criteria because of like other philosophical ideas that I hold myself. But I just like exploring all that's out there as far as the ideas go that posit God. So I don't
Mhm.
really know what exactly to say about that. I wish I
Okay,
could
so you
show
would
you
say that,
something.
yeah, so you're saying kind of like the philosophical ideals you hold to wouldn't be possible within, the coherency of God.
I don't think so, but like I mean, if there's something that's convincing to you, it's possible that it would also be convincing to me.
Well, really quickly, I don't mean to question you on your position too much, but do you think that within your position, God can even be demonstrated?
Um, I'm consistently being like it's seeming less and less likely as the more people I talk to. It's like every argument that I hear, it makes me like think that God is even less real, because I
Hmm.
haven't heard anything that's compelling, and people will boast up a really good argument and they'll give it to me, and it's like got a problem somewhere, or sometimes it's really just flat out bad. Um, Whereas I've heard some really compelling arguments against the existence of God. Now, it does depend on how you define God, too. But every time I've heard God defined, it's entailed some kind of contradiction somewhere along the line. I don't know if
I
that answered your
gotcha, yeah.
question or not.
So, in terms of like, you saying you find, arguments more compelling for the non-existence of God, right? What in which would you say is the thing that made you compelled, right? Because if that thing which made you compelled against God, right, made you compelled against Him, maybe I can use that very same tool or that same criteria to compel you towards Him.
I mean, I was just thinking as honest to myself as I could when I heard these arguments. So, I'm going through like critical thinking. I'm considering the
Hmm.
premises and evaluating whether or not there's a contradiction somewhere, or whether or not there's like a tautology somewhere, if there's something that necessarily follows based on the criteria of how God's described, when you map it onto reality. I think that a lot of the arguments just are assumptions, um,
Hmm.
whereas the ones that are against God's existence are pretty like I mean they're pretty like they cut to the point. They like attack what God is and how it would entail a contradiction. And so that's like why they're
Okay.
convincing to me because since they entail a contradiction, I'm not able to convince myself, nor do I think it's wise to like try to convince myself of something that entails a logical contradiction.
Yeah, I got you. So, in terms of evidence itself, maybe I can hit this from a little bit of a different angle. In terms of like evidence itself, would you say that there would have to be evidence for God to exist? Is there
No,
like a necessity
God could
or
exist. God could exist without there being any evidence for God. Um, like that's entirely possible. I guess God's impliciter could exist without us
Mhm.
knowing about it. He could just be like, I'm going to create the universe and hide. I mean, it seems like if God exists, that's exactly what he did, right? But I mean, yeah, I agree. I think that that's something that could happen.
you think it's possible that there could be no evidence which reaches your criteria of evidence for God being true or existing, even though
Uh,
he does exist?
I do,
Just to
yeah. I
clarify.
mean, I do hold that like, um, I could be wrong. Now, like the way that I understand God to be, I think it does entail a contradiction, but there could be a flaw in my reasoning somewhere along the line, but since I don't know where that is, I don't hold that position, right? So if somebody could
I
show me
got you.
that, then I would. So I give God a non-zero chance, but it's like an infinitesimally small chance, kind of like how I give
I got
Bigfoot
you.
I give Bigfoot like a far less than 1% chance, but he's still just like a mundane creature that's like elusive. He like
He's still technically
he
logically
he could,
possible.
and he's like nomologically possible too. Like he's not even like magical. He's not like a fairy. He doesn't like he's just like a creature
Yeah,
that
he
could
could be.
realistically exist in our world. But whereas God, it's like Bigfoot is so much more realistic than God for me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so my argument for you specifically, I guess, would be that I would say that classical theism is what I would hold to as the model for our world coming into existence. As I would, I mean, I assume you would agree, all models would have flaws at some point, right? I would just hold to classical theism having the least amount of flaws out of all the models, right? So we would just hold to it being probabilistically more true than
I don't know
other
if I'd say if
models.
they all have problems or not, but maybe. Because
Well, like, can
I
you
don't
name
know
a
that.
model which doesn't have a flaw?
That's why I said I don't know. Like I just because I don't know the exhaustive list of models, so I can't like commit myself to that. But
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah,
Well, I would hold a flaw to be like, I guess flaw would be kind of subjective though, right? But I would just hold, like, for example, like the atheist model. I would hold, certain flaws to be that it just holds to too many axioms.
well, the
So you
atheist,
just have to.
there is no one atheist model because some atheists
No,
are
I know,
like,
but I'm just saying, like, within that category, right? Even within that category of models themselves, they would hold to too many axioms.
okay, are you talking about like the fundamental fields, for instance, being multiple necessary things?
Yeah, I would just say that you guys would, say that there's multiple things which are just self-evident, right? Whereas within classical theism, we would just hold to all these things being rooted in the foundation of the one self-evident thing.
I mean, sure, but I think that when you have multiple things that are apparently necessary, I don't know that these things are absolutely necessary. Like when we're talking about the quantum fields, we call
Mhm.
them the fundamental
But they are
fields.
revealed as so.
They just I mean, they are fundamental to the reality that we experience, right? So that's true. But are they absolutely necessary? I mean, I reckon that they would be grounded in something deeper. I just don't know what it would be, and I don't think it could
Hmm.
possibly be God because of other reasons.
What would those reasons be?
So, like, God is supposed to be this, like, ultimate personal foundation for the universe, or like a mind that created the universe. And I think that to posit that there's a mind, it doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't know why anybody would assume that. But if God created the universe, then God created space time, and I don't think that time is the type of thing that can be created just because of the nature of time as we know it. Like time is a measurement of change. It's the transition between temporal moments. It's like the axis in space time in which temporal change can occur, right? So if you have
Yeah.
if you have a state where there is no time, that means that there's no change. It's like a change. It's an unchanging state. And if you have an unchanging state, then you have time. That means the unchanging state changed into a changing state. But an unchanging change necessarily, I'm sorry, an unchanging state necessarily cannot change. Um, so that would be a contradiction for me.
All right, I got you. Yeah. So, just in terms of that specifically, you would actually hold to the same thing within logic. I assume you suppose logic to be true, yes?
I can't escape logic. Yeah, logic is very fundamental.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you agree that things become logically posterior or posteriori?
What? What do you mean?
It would be a posteriori, specifically would be the word. It would be logically posterior, right? So we would just hold to within logic itself, even as an atheist, you would have to hold that there is some things which happen in time, some changes which happen in time that aren't actually temporal.
What kind of
You know what I mean
change
by
would
that?
what kind of change would you be referring to that's not temporal?
Yeah, fire burning someone.
Oh, that is temporal.
Fire burning someone is temporal.
Oh yeah, like because if you have one slice of time, where there's somebody's being burned by fire, there's nothing that's being eaten in that one slice of time. The fire's not consuming in that one slice of time because it would be like frozen in that one moment. If someone were to push pause on time, then there would be no change. You'd be like stuck in one temporal moment. You actually, in order for the
Mhm.
fire to progress and consume the person, you would need time to play out for the fire to continue
Yeah,
to
but the
break them
fire
down.
actively burning someone, right? Let's say we pause the time, right? Is the fire going from untouched and transforming when it touches the skin to a burning sensation actively?
When you push pause?
Yeah, even when you push pause,
No, I
would it
wouldn't
be
say so.
actively
Like
burning?
when it, well,
Not temporally. Here, I can
well,
give you a better. I can actually give you a better example.
but the thing is,
Metal conducting electricity.
okay, metal conducting electricity. So if in a moment where metal is conducting electricity, there's like an electrical current that's passing through the metal. If you were to push pause, then everything in that state would just be stopped in time, and it would stop changing wherever you pushed pause, wherever this current was traveling through the metal, it would stop moving, it would stop changing. So you would still need time in order for the change to occur.
Well, in terms of change occurring specifically, right? Is the metal conducting to something else? Yes, you would agree within a temporal status.
Yeah, the metal would be a conductor for the
Okay.
electricity.
So if we pause time specifically, would it be in between that changing state? If we
So
paused it while
the
it was in that changing state?
yeah, there would be. What was your question? Would it be a conductor still?
No, I'm asking you that, when we have metal, right,
Hmm.
and we have specifically, you know, metal conducting electricity, okay? If I were to pause time temporally, right, could it would it still be in that changing state of conducting electricity?
It wouldn't. It would be in a. It wouldn't be in a changing state of conducting electricity. It would be in a static state of conducting electricity. It wouldn't be changing at all. You would need the next moment for it to continue changing.
Well, like, would you agree that when metal is conducting to electricity, there would be a state in between in which it goes from metal to the conduction straight to the electricity?
I mean, I think that there's like a step-by-step process if that's what you're asking, but you would need time for
Yeah,
that.
so do those steps still occur non-temporally? Can all those steps
No,
be true non-temporally?
they don't
So,
occur non-temporally.
okay, so if I pause time right now and all the metal that's conducting electricity, right, there wouldn't still be conduction happening in the pause of time. There wouldn't still be the metal existing and there wouldn't still be the electricity existing.
No, the
Like, for
metal.
example, if I pause time, here's a better example. Here's a really, really good example, actually. If I pause time in your room right now, would your light still be on?
Yes,
How?
because
How would your lights? I know, but
it would
how
still
would
be
your
on.
light still be on if the metal isn't conducting to it, isn't changing into electricity
All of the particles and all of the energy would be frozen exactly where they are now. So
in a
yeah,
changing state?
no, I'm in like when we change, like when we go from one moment to another, then it's changing. But if you were to pause time, then your changing state would change into an unchanging state. It would stop changing.
Okay, well, there would be an issue in your logic there, right? So, like, in terms of your light specifically staying on, right, it would need a certain amount of voltage to stay on, yes?
For multiple moments of time, yeah. But like if you have a moment where the light is on, it will always be on in that one moment. Like right now it's 1:55 where I am. So for the
Hmm.
duration of this moment, it has sufficient voltage. If you were to pause it, it has voltage for that. It would not run out because there's no energy being used because nothing's changing because time has stopped. So it would remain
Okay.
exactly where it is.
So you would say that it's still purely within actuality, but you wouldn't say that it has the potentiality within its change.
If
Yeah, so
there's
like
if
pure
there's no
actuality.
time, then like there would be no potential. But I do hold to like eternalism
Uh-huh.
insofar as like the B theory of time. So I consider all moments to be actual. And in a meta perspective, like nothing is technically potential. I think that something would have potential from our perspective.
Yeah, so like here's a better. You know what actus purus means?
Is that the Catholic doctrine of like pure act?
Not necessarily. I wouldn't say it's a Catholic doctrine or anything. It's just like a philosophical term, which is like it's supposed to mean like pure actuality. I just thought maybe you would know what it means within its Latin term, right? So like within pure actuality, like your light, for example, right? It doesn't have the potential to change in to any other form. You agree that, yes?
If you're talking about strictly having only one slice of time, and no others, then it would just be static.
Yeah, within a non-temporal status.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have any potential to become anything else, but it would already be within that change. It would already be actualized in the possible way it could be within that non-temporal status it's in. Meaning
Yeah.
that all possible outcomes it could possibly reach, they don't exist because there's no potential for it to reach another possible outcome.
Yeah, like in this one moment, it is actual.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's exactly how you just described it right there. That's exactly how we would describe within classical theism. We would hold to it having no potential to become anything else, for it has actualized everything in every way already. The same way the lights have no potential to change to something else within its already reached status. So the status that God has already reached is within all limits of everything.
Okay, so in your view, it seems like God is in one static, unchanging state, but in that state,
Yeah, he's immutable.
he's actualized all moments, is what you're saying.
Kind of, but a little bit. That would be like act. That's not like that's a more layman's term way to put it. So I'm not saying like that's 100% yes, but like the way you're kind of putting it and the way I think you're thinking about it, it would be yes.
Okay, because like if God's like in a state where um he's immutable, he's unchanging, he's atemporal, then anything that he does is always like he's always doing it actively. He's all actual, like you were saying, which means that
Yeah.
if God exists and God is all actual, then he only has like one act, right? It's just like one act that does whatever it does, and we are
It would just
experiencing them.
be all actuality.
Right.
Yeah.
All actual. Yeah. And if God has, if this is like an eternal state of actuality, there's no like beginning or end. It's just, it is what it is. For as long as God is in that state, the universe exists. It would make the universe eternal, because you wouldn't be able to go far enough back in time to where God is not actualizing the universe. And if the universe is eternal, then it was never like brought into existence. And if the universe wasn't brought into existence, then like
there'd be a flaw within. Yeah, there would be a flaw within the logic there, right? The flaw specifically would be that he would have actualized it not being eternal specifically. So he would have actualized it logically posterior, not temporally, but logically posterior to it being a creation. So, for example, within classical theism, we would hold to Jesus being God, in which all things were created through him, right? And through his incarnation, right? That thing which is happening eternally, we call him being begotten. So we would say that Jesus is the Son to the Father, but we would say he's eternally begotten, not created, right? So through that eternal begottenness, he would actualize all creation being that specifically creation, which creation, definitionally speaking, would be under some sort of temporal status.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying that he would create it to have, I guess, a first and possibly a last moment, but it's always actual, just like a B theory of time that has a beginning and potentially an end.
Yeah, I guess you could say. I mean, in terms of potentially an end, yeah, I like how you phrase potentially an end there.
Because I don't know if you want to
But yeah, we would hold to it having a beginning.
Right. But the thing is, the universe would still always be actual, from like a meta time perspective.
Well, that's the point, right? So it'd be within his pure actuality that he is fully actualizing the universe within a temporal state.
It seems like God.
The actualization of the universe. Yeah, really quickly. Here's a better idea. Well, here's a better idea, right? Within the universe, we have some sort of temporal status, right? That temporal status, he is eternally actualizing, right? Now, I understand that you're saying, well, hang on, if he's eternally activizing an a temporal status, then that temporal status logically would now have to be eternal since he's eternally activizing it. But he'd be eternally activizing a beginning and an end.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, I get that. So, yeah, but we've already. Yeah,
that would be my point.
I'm already on the same page as you. But like if God is eternally actualizing the universe, let's say, it seems like if God is immutable, he's eternally actualizing the universe. In my view, it seems like this like entirely could be the case. Like I think that the set of all moments is just necessary. But if it's grounded in something deeper and more metaphysical, we wouldn't have access to it, but it could be the case, and that would be what you're talking about. But I wouldn't consider that to be God, just because I don't know how it could possibly be personal. I don't know how it could have like a thinking mind, as in order to have a mind that thinks, you would need it to be able to process information. But it can't do that if it's immutable. It wouldn't really be able to have any intention that it could act upon. Like if you were to say that like if God is immutable, do you hold to divine simplicity?
Divine simplicity?
Yeah, like God does not have parts.
It would depend on how you're putting it, but yeah, sure. Yeah, I would hold to God not having parts necessarily, right. Okay. In terms of like his essence not being divided.
Right. So like, would you say that like God's actions are God?
That his actions are God?
Right. Like, because
it would depend.
And the doctrine of divine, I'm not talking about the effects, but like his action, like his act would be him. It's something that necessarily follows.
No, we wouldn't say his his qualities are him, right? But his actions, it's a little bit of a different phrasing, right? Because his word, right, you could maybe argue is his action. We would hold to his word, or specifically his knowledge, his theos, as being him. We would hold to his spirit as being him too, right? So I mean, you could maybe argue those being actions, but we wouldn't hold to his qualities being him. No. So we would hold to.
But then if God is okay, so maybe not his actions, but it seems like even if his actions are not him, it seems like his actions still necessarily follow from his existence alone, as God is immutable. So however God exists, then he is sufficient for whatever he's sufficient for, and he's not sufficient for whatever he's not sufficient for, and that does not change. If he's sufficient for something, then it occurs. Right, like he's sufficient to create the universe, therefore the universe exists, and it could not have been any other way. It seems like God does not have
that's not
his
necessarily
own will
true.
That he can act upon.
Yeah, we wouldn't hold to that being necessarily true.
Okay, well, so
like in terms of him being sufficient, yeah, the contention specifically would be that within his all-powerfulness, he'd be sufficient to do with anything within all logical parameters. We wouldn't hold to everything within all logical parameters being true. Like, for example, like we talked about earlier, You know, Bigfoot
But
is
that's not what I'm
logically
saying.
possible.
I'm not saying that he does
All right, go
everything
for
that's
it.
logically possible. I'm saying that like everything he's sufficient for um is right because if he's
What do you mean
not
by sufficient?
like so in logic if something is sufficient if A then B, so like if you have A then B just necessarily follows because A is sufficient for B. Like God creating the universe, let's say that God would be A, and that would be a collection of all the things that are necessary to instantiate the universe, including his will and his act. That would be included in A. So like if it's God without the will to create the universe or the act of creating the universe, like then we would say that that's not sufficient to create the universe. So that would not be
Hmm.
A. But if God has
Yeah,
the will and is in the act of creating the universe, that would be sufficient to creating the universe, right?
yeah, I think I'm kind of understanding.
Okay,
Go
so
for
like
it.
if God
Well,
is
in terms of like
sufficient,
your,
if God is
mhm,
sufficient to
actually
create,
go for it.
yeah, if God is sufficient to create the universe naturally follows. And if he's like, as you were saying, he's in an eternally all actual state of actualizing all the moments. And this there is a first moment, but like he's eternally actualizing all of them because he's sufficient for them because he has the will and he's performing the act. But since he's immutable, he's like I guess in layman's terms, he's like always doing this. He's doing one thing at a
Kind of.
time always. Um, it gets really
He's
funny
actualizing
in
all
logic.
things at all time.
Right. So he's not like moving through time because then he would be changing himself. So he would be atemporal.
Well, through the incarnation, he could. Right? We would hold to Jesus Christ being the Son, who is God. Through that incarnation, right? The incarnation, though, would be kind of a different story. That'd be a bit of a different conversation. But yeah, within what you're talking about, within the time frame he would hold to, which is no time at all, he'd be immutable and
Right.
unchanging.
So yeah, so it would be immutable. So then what I'm trying to say is that if God is immutable, God does not change. Any act that God is I mean from the meta perspective, like where he's
Hmm.
transcending time, he would just be actualizing whatever he's sufficient to actualize and not actualizing whatever he's not sufficient. And it could just be because he doesn't have the will to do it, and he never will have the will to actualize X, Y, or Z because he only wants to actualize A, B, and C, for instance. So then that would mean he's not sufficient to do that, which is not like a problem necessarily. For the angle that I'm going for, what I'm trying to get at is that God is not able to really act upon his will freely because in order to do it freely, he would need to. It would have been possible for him to have done differently, but if God's nature and God's qualities are necessary and immutable, then they cannot change. So whatever he wills, that is permanently what he wills, and he cannot like deviate from that. So it seems like he wouldn't really be a thinking agent with like a free will. It seems more like he would be. I don't know if we would call it a he, or even a they or something with personhood. I think it would just be something that is a natural force if this is what's the case. And now this is like something I don't really so the reason we got here is because you were trying to help me with a contradiction that I had found. But like even if we posit this, I would still be in the
Hmm.
place of I don't know how to like actually verify that this is even the case. And if we did, it seems like it would be something that would not be personal. I think it would be a really difficult thing to demonstrate
Yeah,
that God is
this is all
personal,
really good questions.
which is what makes
I
God
actually
God.
liked, yeah. Earlier, you gave an example, a syllogism specifically, if A, then B, right? That specifically in and of itself, you would agree it's not temporal, right?
No, 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 no. That's like
Yeah.
yeah, no,
A
that's like
syllogism would be something which is like not, it's a structure, right?
right. Yeah, it's just showing what is what logically follows. It's talking about
Ca-
ontological priority and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, can I make sure I still man your gripe here? Are you saying that because God acts freely, then God must be able to do otherwise? If God could do otherwise, then he'd be changeable or not necessary. So God is not truly free.
Yeah, that's the long and short of it.
Okay, great. So would you say that I guess we would actually technically be right in a sense, right? the issue would stand within his that we would hold to him having a nature which he would still be confined by. So, like for example, can God create a rock that he cannot lift? That's kind of the paradox that you would actually be pushing onto, right? In terms of us trying to glaze God and make him out to be this all powerful being who could do all things, we within our own theology would hold to him actually not being able to do all things, obviously those which are not logically possible, right? So he is actually confined by his nature. His nature specifically would make up properties such as, we'll take for example, omnibenevolence. We would hold to within the property of omnibenevolence because through his nature, he's not able to do things which are bad or come from some sort of moral wrongdoing, right? Now, does that now mean that he doesn't have the will or the freedom to do those things? Well, yes and no. It would all lie within the nature specifically. That nature, which he is confided by, he cannot disobey or contradict with that nature. For him to have the will to do all things within how you're speaking of it, there would have to be some sort of contradiction that would have to follow.
Okay,
We would
so
say necessarily.
right.
Yeah, go for it.
So like when I hear like omnibenevolence posited as one of God's immutable attributes, this is like a really funny territory because I'm a moral anti-realist. Now I've heard compelling arguments for moral realism, and I'm kind of flirting with it. But as of it stands right now, I'm an anti-realist. So it would seem to me like if God is omnibenevolent, it's almost meaningless. I would have to frame it from my own perspective or from at least like a consensus view of society at large, where we take like something that's like trivially morally true, like
Yeah. Would you say that
like child murder or something like that. I think that we could all just like agree, even if we have different reasons for believing that it's wrong, we could all at least agree that that's wrong for the most part. So, and I would say I think that we would agree that God being omnibenevolent, he would be like against that, right?
Yeah, I would say that within the properties of being against that, it would be dependent on the situation.
So God is sometimes for child murder.
For child murder?
Yeah,
Well,
that's what I
murder
said.
itself, that would be kind of a bit. Well, it would be a bit of a baked or loaded question, right? Because in terms of definitionally speaking, we would say that it would be unjust, right? So
Right.
in terms of like child alivement, right? It would all be kind of subjective on how you're viewing him being for something. Like for example, if I watched a child unalive in front of my arms and didn't do anything about it, someone may see that as me being for it since I didn't do anything about it, whereas somebody from their subjective viewpoint would not come to that conclusion just because I didn't do anything about it, right? Kind of, so it would be kind of subjective to the situation essentially, right? But we would just hold to within like that immutable change, right? I guess the issue or the flaw in your critique would be that you're holding presuppositions which wouldn't be possible within
So
God's view.
let me ask you this, like, do you believe that child murder exists? Like that's a thing that happens in reality?
Do I believe it's a thing which happens in reality?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So child murder happens, and God is necessarily always against child murder because of the way it's defined. It's unjust.
Well, in terms of against it, what do you mean by that?
Like he's never being like, yay, child murder. I think that's a good thing that should happen.
I would say that he wouldn't necessarily push that, right? He wouldn't push
So
innocent
are you
blood.
saying that he's like he's what? He's like sometimes neutral about it?
No, so we would hold to God technically being able to distribute that action, but we wouldn't hold to God loving that action. So, for example, I could, technically go out and, accidentally run someone over. Now, because I've done that action, that wouldn't necessarily follow that I would, love doing that action.
But that's not exactly what I'm getting at. I'm saying like
Mhm.
um you have people who deliberately will do child murder, like on purpose, knowing
Sure.
that it's like they'll even think that it's wrong, but
Yep.
maybe they just love being bad.
Sure.
Is God ever for that?
Is God ever for that?
Yeah, like is he
We
for
were just
people doing child murder on purpose just for the love of being bad?
it like I said, it would be context dependent, right?
So
But
there
I
is
would just
wait, wait,
hold
wait. So
to
like,
it.
are you saying that there is a context in which God is for people doing child murder, for the sake of being
Well,
bad? Like there is
when
a
we're
context
talking
that
about
exists.
logical, well, when we're talking about logical possibilities here, right? Kind of like how we said earlier, Bigfoot is logically possible, or Superman's logically possible. Within the qualities of God, of His omnibenevolence, He could be for said thing, right? While it being through a good intention, right? So, for example, like if God was, I can't really think of too good of an example off the top of my head, but let's just say hypothetically God wanted child unalivement to happen,
No, child
right?
murder.
But it was for,
We're doing child murder,
yeah,
like
child,
unjustified.
yeah. Well, I don't like saying murder on the TOS. Is that okay within your life? You're okay with
I've
saying
been
that?
saying it this whole time. I even have
Oh
restrictions
yeah,
open
that's right.
right
Well, a
now.
lot of people on their yeah. So child murder. Let's just say hypothetically speaking, child murder was something that was within God's plan. We would hold that the intent behind it cannot be evil intent.
Okay. Can you like explain how that's possible if murder is necessarily unjust?
Well, it wouldn't
How like
be. It wouldn't be my.
God would be like somehow justified in allowing or prescribing, however you want to look at it, um an unjust action.
Yeah, it wouldn't actually be my burden of proof though to describe that possibility of it being trueness, or not to describe that possibility of it being true, right? Like I kind of just demonstrated that within that possibility he would have to have good intent, right? But in terms of me describing how it's not possible or is possible, right? That would be kind of like the burden of proof would lie
Well,
on whoever's making the
maybe I can
claim.
like syllogize it. So like um
Hmm.
uh murder is necessarily unjust. Um Murder happens if God exists and God is omnibenevolent, then he is just. He's like all just. Um Someone who is all just would not allow injustice. Conclusion: God doesn't exist.
Wait, sorry. I'm just trying to make sure. You're. Let me go through these premises. What was premise one? Just to make sure I have this
That
right.
murder is necessarily unjust. Maybe I can
Okay.
type it out.
And premise two was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That would probably be better.
Let me see. I'll pull up the notepad.
Premise two was just so I can follow along and understand your premises here.
Well, it also helped me to remember how I phrased it because I kind of just like said it. I don't know. I'll make sure that I am consistent here. So let me put this up on the screen over here. Notepad. Okay. So
Murder is unjust.
okay, murder is necessarily unjust. We'll do. Murder exists in reality. Then I think 3 was God is all just. Something that is all just would never allow injustice. God does not exist.
Gotcha. Make sure I have that typed out too. All right, great. Yeah, I guess there would actually be a few gripes I would have, even with P1, right? Specifically, when you say necessarily, how would you define that?
I said that murder is necessarily unjust because murder is defined as the unjust killing.
Wait, are definitions objective?
They're descriptive.
Yeah, but are they objective?
Well, let me ask you this actually. So, because I think this is an important question. Do you think
Mhm.
that there is ever a time in reality where injustice happens? Because that's really cutting to the chase.
That injustice happens? Yeah,
Right.
sure. I would say that it's possible within reality injustice could happen. Yeah. So I guess
Okay.
that would, yeah. But just in terms of premise one, I would say that I still would disagree with it. But yeah, sure, that could be
Okay,
filled in
this
for
then.
premise one.
Injustice is necessarily unjust. I think that's obvious. And then we'll do injustice exists in reality. If God exists, God is all just. Something that is all just would never allow injustice. This is actually way cleaner. Thank you for cleaning up my syllogism for me. It's way
Yeah,
better.
I was just saying in terms of like how you're putting it, I wouldn't necessarily, not trying to be pedantic, but just trying to better understand.
Do you have any premise that you would reject at this point?
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure I got it right. So now that you've changed it, injustice is necessarily unjust. Injustice exists in reality. Well, even injustice being necessarily unjust, I mean, that still kind of would be
That's just a tautology.
definitionally would break. Yeah, it would definitionally break down a little bit, but still, injustice exists in reality. Sure, if God exists, then God is all just. Even within that, I guess that would only presuppose like a Christian paradigm, right? It wouldn't
Right, but
account for
that's
like
what this
deism.
is.
But
That's why
sure,
I'm using this one.
yeah, it would just be towards like a Christian
Because you
paradigm.
posited
Yeah, sure.
omnibenevolence as a property of God.
Yeah, sure. And then something that is all just would never allow injustice. Yeah, I would just disagree with premise 4.
Okay, so under what context would something that is all just allow injustice?
Yeah, so in terms of that, are you stating that justice is entailing absolute prohibition of like permitted instantiation?
Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, just in terms of like, how it's stating, are you saying that it's necessarily true that that the prohibition of, injustice would, necessarily equate to never allowing said thing?
Yeah, so I think that if something is all just, then allowing injustice would just be a contradiction in its nature. And as far as justice being something that is, I guess you're asking if it's objective. I don't know that if that's what you're asking.
Well, no, I'm just saying it's necessarily true, like in all possible worlds.
That the fourth premise follows in all possible worlds?
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's something that's all just.
Okay.
Because if something was like mostly just, then maybe it would allow injustice. But if something's all just, then it would. I think it would never allow injustice. Because it would be like because if it's like if it happens and it doesn't have the power to, it's not like it's allowing it; it's trying to stop it, right? Potentially, it's like something that's like all just but not all powerful. So like injustice could still happen.
Yeah. There's actually a very easy defeater for this argument that I just realized, but I actually want to take another approach just for the sake of like just talking about it.
You don't
what
want
would you say
you don't
is
want to destroy the argument. You want to like you want to like.
Well, there's a bit of a defeater here. I'm kind of seeing right now. I'll tell you about it after, but just for the sake of like understanding your view on like just how you're arguing this, within like what are you positing as the contradiction for an all just thing allowing unjust things?
Let me see if I can think of a good way to word it. It seems like it would just
Just
be
I will
antithetical to its
to be
nature.
I'll be honest with you. I am looking for an exact P not P
Okay, sure.
since
Let
we
me
are
see if I
talking from
can.
like a logical
Let me see
perspective
if I
here.
can. Let me see if I can do that for you. So,
Yeah.
let's see. For well, no, we'll do it like this. 4.1. Um, without just like restating it. Let me see. What about this?
Yeah. If something is all just, it will always act in a just way. Allowing injustice is unjust. Sure. I would say if something is, it's always acting within its. Well, you kind of just repeated your premise, but
Because I think that the premise is
yeah,
already kind of a tautology. It's like I'm trying to like break it down. Like
yeah. I
if
got
something
you. I
is
got you. I
all
got
just,
you.
because like now I'm trying to like make the terms be like a direct P and not P, so that it translates cleanly. If
Sure.
something is
Within
all
these
just,
premises, yeah.
yeah.
Within these premises, I would just say that in terms of acting in a just way, right? I would just say that way in which the issue would lie in how you're defining just. Would you define just as how the all just thing would define it?
Oh, it actually doesn't matter how we define it because we're just using just simpliciter.
So it would be within how the all just thing would define it then, yeah?
Because like
If
because
it's
it
a
seems like if something
simpliciter.
is all just, if it's subjective, then it would be like it would be subjective to, I suppose, whatever's like I could be all just and you could be all just if it's subjective, and we could have different ideas of what justice is, and it would still both be true. But if it is objective, like if God is omnibenevolent and it's subjective, then it's just kind of meaningless to say these omnibenevolent. It's like
Yeah, I know, but we would hold that it's
whatever God
objective
does
here, right?
is like justified in his own opinion at that point, which is kind of how it's
Yeah,
automatically sounds to me. So I'm kind of trying to entertain the like idea that justice is like this
something which
objectively
he
immutable
creates or
thing.
he
Yeah, right. Like it's something.
yeah.
So then whatever that is, whatever that entails, we'll just call that just. However God
Well,
views justice.
I guess there would be technically another defeater in your argument, but just for like entertaining, just to make sure I understand your position anyway,
Wait a minute. So
I'm willing
so like
to.
there's been two times now where you've said that there's a defeater, but then you didn't give it. Now I'm suspicious that you have found us a defeater.
Okay, I'll actually give you just the defeaters right now specifically, right? Before you laid out everything else, right? When you just had your first four premises, the one issue I would say with premise four is that when you say something is all just, that would presuppose that there are things which are injustice, right? So in terms of those things existing, we would just say since that there's things which are necessarily just, we would say that because of that, there would have to be things which would fall under that category, which would be necessarily unjust, right? And then my second defeater was specifically that if we're defining it how God defines it, right? God would just we would just say that God defines allowing injustice as all just.
Okay, so
But I still kind of wanted to hear what you were saying
allowing
within the contradiction with
so
allowing it.
allowing injustice is just it's like so that would just be like it would be just to be unjust, and unjust is the opposite of
Well, no, you're
just.
presupposing that allowing injustice would be unjust, right? I would just say allowing
I, I
injustice
I think
is
that's like
just.
trivially true. That's like trivially true though. Like injustice is
Like,
defined as
are you saying
unjust.
it's trivially? Are you saying that's objectively true though? Like
I
trivially,
think it's like definitionally true.
that allowing injustice would now mean that you're unjust?
Yeah.
Yeah, but who's creating that definition, right? If we're saying it's God who's creating that definition, then he can just say it's definitionally true because he's the one who's creating the definition itself. He's the one by which the definition itself would even source from here,
So
since we're relying on
what's God's definition so we can utilize that?
his definition specifically.
Yeah.
Well, no, I wouldn't be able to hold to what his definition is specifically, but we could hold to that it necessarily would entail that it would allow for unjust things to be allowed. Like kind of a bit of a freedom of will, as you would say.
So because
Right.
God is, so it sounds like you're saying like because God is all just, and he allows unjust things, the conclusion is allowing unjust things is just.
No, I'm saying that within your argument on how you're framing it, right? If you're saying that definitionally speaking, allowing unjust things is unjust, I would just say I reject your definition since the premises seem to be concluding in some sort of internal or it seem to be some sort of internal critique, right? Unless you're doing some sort of external critique here within your argument, I guess that would be different. But I was assuming you were doing some sort of internal critique, and internally you would have to just accept, unless you can find a P not P contradiction with God defining within his, characteristics of being all just or omnibenevolent, like all good here, right? Unless you can find a contradiction with, you know, injustice being allowed or freedom of will specifically, I guess would be what we would point to, right? Then there would be, no defeater there, right? And that actually would fit in with my second defeater I had, which is that since justice exists, therefore necessarily things which don't meet that mark of justice must necessarily also exist because justice would
I
presuppose
mean,
that there's a line between what's justified and what's unjustified.
so I think that it seems like justice really can only exist, um, with I think we would only understand it as justice if there was such a thing as injustice. So I kind of see what you were saying before with that.
Yeah.
But it also seems like if that's the case, I only could see that if God is a just creator, then he would not create a system where in which there is injustice. So it seems like you would only have justice and injustice in a world where there is no God.
Well, that would create some sort of closed system, right? That you would presuppose. Or is that
Well, I
what you're
think
saying?
that because I think that what you're doing is presupposing God here, where like since God exists, then allowing injustice must be just because he's all just and he allows injustice. So I think that like that would be
Hmm.
like you presupposing it.
Yeah. What would be the contradiction with that, though? Specifically in that defeater alone.
In what I just said.
Yeah.
So
You,
I
you
would say
raised
that
the
like
you raised the
I would say
question
that
there,
you're
but
I would say that you're
what would be like the
presupposing.
contradiction?
Well, I'm not trying to state a contradiction. I'm trying to say that like you were presupposing that God exists because of the way that you're defining, or because of the way that you're
Well, yeah,
justifying, because of the way that you're justifying your negation of P4.
yeah, but that's your entire argument too. You would be presupposing God exists within your argument since you're doing an internal critique. Now, if you were doing an external critique, that would be different, right? But your internal critique already presupposes he exists, right?
I
The whole
think,
point
well,
is that you're
I think what
presupposing
I was
even
trying to
if
do was
he
an
does
external
exist,
critique.
it's
I
a
hope I'm not
contradiction.
contradicting myself. I think that what I was trying to do was an extra because I wrote down if God exists.
Yeah, so you're accepting that the proposition, let's just say the proposition was true. You're saying that there is some sort of logical incoherency, right? So if you were doing an external critique, you would reject, you know, the grounds on whether or not God exists, right? In terms of like an internal critique, I mean, at least on how I understand it, you would accept all my propositions to be true, and within those propositions all being true, you would have to, I mean, there's
Right.
other ways to do it, but a good example is find a contradiction within that, right? So when you say if God exists, right, which is a proposition I hold to, you're saying if that this proposition is true, well then X thing contradicts that. So therefore God cannot exist.
Mm-hmm.
Within logical parameters specifically.
Okay. So just to like go back to this, the contention is premise 4. Something that is all just would never allow injustice. So you would hold it to be actually true. Just to like kind of summarize, something that is all just would allow injustice.
I would hold it to be true that it could allow injustice, that there wouldn't be a contradiction. In fact, the two defeaters I gave you would actually work hand in hand, like I kind of said earlier, in terms of if he's all just, necessarily unjust things must exist because there's a standard for justice. I mean, like if there's a standard there, then there has to be both ends of the spectrum there. There has to be an absence of that justice, right? Now, we wouldn't hold to like things like evil or injustice having ontology, just like you guys wouldn't necessarily, even within the atheist standpoint, right? But the difference would be the absence of that. So, like for example, to give you a little bit, better within like the Christian standpoint, we would hold to sin specifically. There's a reason why we don't just say like evil; we say sin specifically, right? Because it goes back to the Greek word harmatia, which would essentially be defined as the missing of God's mark, right? So we wouldn't say evil exists within an ontological form. We would just say evil is the absence of that mark or that standard.
Okay, when you don't meet God's standard, that's considered evil.
That would be considered a sin, which would be considered, evil, I guess you could say.
So not missing
Within
so
layman's terms.
missing God's mark is evil. Okay. So and so the big problem that I have here with this one, and I guess really with all of it, is that like if God is the triomni prime mover, then everything that is caused is necessarily intended by the first mover, like by the prime mover. So if there is somebody who misses the mark, then that was all according to plan.
Well, in terms of it being all according to plan, there would be a bit of a discrepancy there, right? So, in fact, we wouldn't even say that it would be necessarily true, right? I would actually reject that because necessarily, and definitionally speaking, or at least how I understand it, would just mean in like all possible worlds. I would just hold to that there is a possible world like that could be created where God wills for us to do exactly everything we have done now all the way up until the point where I maybe sneezed 1 second ago or something, right? It's logically possible. In fact, within classical theism specifically, I wouldn't hold to this necessarily, or this is, I guess, where we would differ, but that a God which is, tripersonal, the Trinity specifically, they wouldn't even hold to that relation being necessarily true in all possible worlds.
Wait,
They would just hold to the essential being.
let me just I don't know if you actually stated that this was your stance or not earlier, but do you believe in a B theory of time?
A B theory of time?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Where all moments are actual? Because we were talking about this earlier, and I think that we were talking about it as if you did, but I don't know if you actually ever explicitly said that that was your position.
Are you saying like actus purus? Are
Yeah,
you saying that
kinda,
all
yeah,
moments
like
are actualized?
the past and the future are just as real as the present.
are just as real? Like, when you say just as real, what do you mean by that?
So
Can you go a
if
little
this
bit deeper on
moment,
that?
here's like a example I use a lot. If this moment is one frame of a movie, the entire film of that movie exists, and that film represents all of time, but we experience one frame at a time. Do you hold to like that, where all the moments are equally actual, but we experience them passing as if they are like coming into existence and leaving existence? Like it seems like the present is all that exists, but in actuality, all moments do. Because I think that like you would have to hold to that if
And,
like God is like actualizing the universe with
well,
the
I wouldn't
present.
say that it would. Um, I would say it would fit a little bit more naturally within like an A theory, right? Which would be a little bit different. Wouldn't you agree?
No, I think that like that kind of messes it all up. Like if if
Hmm.
if the A because if you have an A theory of time where um the present is all that exists and the past no longer exists and the future is going to exist, uh, then you would have a situation where God is actualizing one moment at a time, literally, rather than actualizing all
Well,
the moments.
actually, in terms of like both of them, I guess you could say both of them would fit technically, right? Because when we're talking about him actualizing, that right there wouldn't be a temporal act he's doing. It would just become like a kind of like a syllogism, right? In terms of a syllogism, we wouldn't hold to a syllogism being temporal.
Well, this
We would
this
hold
could
to
like
things being logically posterior, though.
okay, so if only one moment of time exists at a time, this could lead to a contradiction in God's knowledge if he's immutable.
Yeah, what's the
Like,
contradiction?
because does God know what time it is right now?
Does God know what time it is right now?
Right.
Yeah, within like how he's acting it out, yes.
Hmm.
It would be dependent on in terms of how he would be acting it out. He knows all times through all places because he'd be present in all places.
Hmm. But like only one moment is actual at a time. It's like in the actual moment he knows what like he's like currently God's knowledge is it is currently 2:42 Eastern time. Like that's his
Well,
knowledge.
for God,
Yes.
no, we wouldn't hold that for God specifically. His time would be that. In fact, he would exist outside of time. He would exist in all these places at once, right? So, in terms of like, for example, I guess an A theory, right? That like only the present exists, right? But the past and the future does not yet, right? We would hold to God being outside of that closed system. Now, whether or not that closed system would be relevant to something that's temporal or not, right? Such as A theory or B theory, right? It wouldn't necessarily contradict either way, right? So classical theism would actually allow for both.
I really don't see I don't know how you solved it. Like, because the thing is, if only the present exists, right? Like literally the only thing that's actual is the present. Then like that God would have to know that there is a change. So he would know back when I asked before what time it is right now. Back then it was 2:42, and God at that moment knew that it is actually 2:42 because the present is all that exists. Now it's 2:43. So God would he would change from knowing that it's 2:42 to knowing that it's 2:43, and there isn't a time where God is existing in 2:43 before. Now it's 2:44. God just now learned that it's 2:44, just like I did. And there is not an actual moment of 2:45 Eastern time on this day yet. So he does not know that it's that time yet. You could say that he exists in that time, but that would just contradict the A theory.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying fully. Yeah. To my understanding, this would actually be something which still would exist even within it. There would just be different explanations for it. So I actually just made sure, just to make sure I understood. There's a philosopher who's widely acclaimed with this specifically within classical theism and A theory specifically, right? His name's William Lane Craig. Specifically, how he would describe it is that God exists timelessly before creation, not before temporally, but logically posterior.
Does
Kind
he
of
mean
how I described earlier.
the spotlight theory?
The spotlight theory? No, I don't believe that's him. I think I
I
don't
don't
see
know. I'm
spotlight
not saying
theory
like he
currently
came up
here.
with it. I'm saying like, is this what he holds to?
I'm not. I don't see that. No,
Okay.
no.
Are you familiar
It
with what I'm
looks like
talking
he's
about?
saying. No, I'm not sure what
Okay.
you mean by
All
that.
right. Well,
The
maybe it'll be
spotlight
relevant
theory.
later.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't personally. Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Maybe he does. I'm not really sure. I'm not too familiar with this specifically, right? But he describes it as God exists timelessly before creation. God creates time itself. Once time exists, God enters into a real temporal relations with creations. God remains immutable in his essence nature, but his relational properties change. That would
right.
honestly
Like
be something which I kind of
he
would
would have
agree
Cambridge
with.
properties that change. Um, but like in order for God to enter, he would have to like the creation would have to be like created around him, right? Like otherwise, if he's
Well,
entering, then he's the one moving into it.
here's a better idea of it. In terms of God, a lot of theists, specifically Islam or like Mormonism or all these, would assert God being a being, right, which exists within existence itself, right? Because being definitionally, as you probably know, would be that which is of existence. Us in classical theism, we would hold that God is existence itself, right? So him entering into that, he'd be the source of said thing. Now, in terms of his relational properties, the reason why we would say that relationally he wouldn't be immutable is because there's things like the incarnation, such as like Jesus Christ, who had a human nature at one point, which is technically like, which would make him not immutable, although he would have still that divine nature. So how he's kind of describing it is you would have two states of God. You would have one which acts relationally and one that still would hold to all the essential properties being immutable.
It sounds like you're describing God having two different parts.
Well, not necessarily two different parts, right? So, like, for example, within
Or two
Jesus
different
Christ, we
modes.
would hold. No, we wouldn't hold to him having two different modes of existence. That's not necessarily how we would describe it.
Then what do you
Modes
mean by
themselves,
states?
though, yeah, those states would just be descriptors of how he exists. So, who's a good? I'm just trying to make sure I'm quoting this correctly before I do quote it. I believe it is specifically is is Basil of Ceracia. So Basil of Ceracia, when asked the question in terms of if God is begotten or unbegotten specifically, he answers in terms of the what or what something is, right? We would hold to that what being as what he is as immutable, right? So that would just be the descriptors of his properties and things like this, right? Now you have the what, and then you'd have the how, and then you'd have the who. So the who would just be the hypostases, the persons by which would subsist of the tripersonal God we're speaking of, right? But the how is specifically what we would be tapping on. Within the how, there are different modes of that how, right? So just like how we have the Son who, becomes incarnate, that's something within the how of how that's working, right? We would divide that up into parts, that how, sure, but within his what, his essential properties, we wouldn't divide that. So how God works, sure, we would maybe kind of divide that up there. We would say there's distinctions in how he works, right? But we would say that about who he is too. We would say there's distinctions within his personage. But what he is specifically, we wouldn't hold to a distinction in.
Okay.
Does that better answer your question?
Nah. It like maybe I'm too like tired to really make sense of
That's
it
fair.
at this point.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so to I guess better put it in maybe more layman's terms, we would say that there's a distinction or dividing, as you would put it, in how God works, but we wouldn't say that necessarily affects what he is. We wouldn't say there's a division or a distinction in what he is. So, like God working temporally within time, how I described him as, two different modes, right? We wouldn't say that's two different modes of existence. We would just say that's two different modes of how he's
Well,
existing.
I feel like that's I feel like I don't really know what the difference is. Um, like you've got see, it's hard to even describe without using the word part. You've got God that's not in
Hmm.
time, then you've got God that is in time, and if he doesn't have parts, that means that the whole of God is in time and the whole of God is outside of time. That doesn't sit
Hmm.
right with me logically. Now if God is in time and if God is immutable, uh outside of time, I think that just necessarily follows. But if God is in time, I think it necessarily follows that he's not immutable. Um, if God's knowledge of what's happening in the world right now um, is under an A theory, then his knowledge would change necessarily from moment to moment.
Yeah.
So even outside of time, God would still know, or God would still have changing thoughts, which would be a contradiction there. He would have to be in time in order to be able to change.
So here's a better, maybe I can tackle from this point. In terms of how we're talking about God, right? A very common question comes up in terms of whether God is begotten or unbegotten. This would have to do with in relation to the Son. This would be an analogy I'm posing in terms of how you're putting it, right? Am I saying that there's some sort of P not P contradiction in how he's existing? Since, for example, begotten would oppose unbegotten. Because we would go under the assumption that God is both begotten, unbegotten, and proceeding, right?
I mean, yeah, like if I
Uh,
think that would be a contradiction, assuming they
mhm.
have the same identity.
That's where it would go. That's where it would kind of go off the deep end there, right?
Yeah, like
So
like
I'll kind of explain it
if you're
how.
positing the like non-heretical trinity, I think that's like extraordinarily illogical, yeah.
Yeah. So similarly, when we speak about God, the term unbegotten, it does not signify his essence, but that which he is from no source specifically. So within time itself, we would say that he exists immutably beyond time, right? Now, in terms of, you have a question there?
I was just thinking back to like when you were bringing up um uh WLC. Um, you're quoting it. Do you hold to his view, by the way, or no?
Oh no, I'm just describing his views.
Okay.
I would say I'm more agnostic on this since I
Because
have
his view
really
is
no
like
clue. But how
his
he's
view is like
describing it,
God
I'm
is
just looking at it.
God is like outside of time, but then he creates time.
Hmm.
Like he exists like before time, and I guess he's not talking about it in a temporal sense, but
Well,
rather like a logical sense.
I'm
Um,
more arguing in yeah, I'm more arguing in terms of his view and actually every view of everybody. So what classical theism would hold to is that his view, B time, all these things could also technically be true. And they would always technically could still be like all these arguments given for whether he's, you know, whether you're holding to A theory or B theory, they could still be true within classical theism. We would just hold to, what's the most probabilistic. That would be kind of up to your opinion, right? At least that's what I'm seeing from
no,
William
I think
specifically on his work.
I just think that there's I don't know how a theory could be true under classical theism. I think that it does posit it, but I'm not exactly sure. I think that it would be like the biggest problem because of like his knowledge changing, because if God's immutable, his knowledge can't change, but it would have to change if his knowledge is complete. He would know about like present tense, and if the present changes,
Okay.
then it would change his knowledge
Here,
necessarily.
I guess the simplest way I could put it is that this thing, right, whether it would be A theory or B theory, this how of how God does things, it wouldn't be reducible to his essence. It wouldn't be reducible to his essence, and by which we would only affirm that his essence is immutable. So in terms of how he's existing,
But is his
right,
is
there
his
could
is his like I thought that his knowledge was a part of, not a part of, but like I thought his knowledge was under simplicity, under divine simplicity, identical to his essence.
well, it would be within respect to, what there's knowledge of, right? So we could actually technically say God doesn't have knowledge of certain things, because definitionally speaking, there's a way by which you could claim knowledge is that which is of experience. So, like, for example, we wouldn't say that God has knowledge of how it feels to be punched in the face, because that which is of his experience, right? He's never experienced that thing,
Well, if God is
right? So we wouldn't hold.
if God is existence itself, I mean, people who have been punched in the face exist, so then God would know what it feels
It's
like.
That's not necessarily how we would point it up. We would point that God being in existence itself would be that he is the source of said thing, but he is not said thing,
So he's not
right?
existence,
So
he's
we're
the
not.
source of existence.
Well, him being the source of existence would make him the source of existence, is how we would describe it. So a
But
bit of an analogy here, which kind of it's a bit of a bad analogy, but this is like the
I
best I
think
can
wait, I
come
think
up
that
with.
a better way to
I'm
put
very
it might
tired.
be I think the better way to put it might be like God is the source of his external of all external existence to him. Like, because I think that he would have to be his own existence, because he can't be the source of existence if he is existence. Like he'd be the source of himself, cyclic, like in a circular fashion. Because
Well, that's actually, yeah,
God would
that's
have
actually
to
what we would technically hold
God would
to.
have to say
Like,
like
in
you would hold to the circular, like he like is the source of
by
himself.
by technicality, yes, we would say that, kind of back to God necessarily exists. He'd be like a axiom, essentially. He's self-evident. Something must necessarily exist, so therefore God necessarily exists. Now, we wouldn't say that God is dependent on himself, like the circular thing. That's where I would differentiate with you. We wouldn't say he's dependent on
It
anything
seems like it
necessarily,
wouldn't be
right?
perfectly
But
accurate to say that he is existence or he's the source of existence. I think you could say that like God exists and he's the source of all other existence. I think is a pretty like concise way to put it, but I don't know if that's like I don't know if that's part of a
well,
dogma.
the reason why we would say he is existence is because it would be in light of how the church fathers would specifically describe him. They would describe him as a substance. Now, of that substance, since that substance is the source of all things, we would be of that substance. We would be of the same of that substance, since we're sourcing from that substance. Now, we wouldn't hold to that substance being, being which resides in that substance, specifically that is being sourced from, but we would hold to that substance existing outside of it independently. So a better way of saying it is just kind of how you put it. Within like layman's terms, we would just say that we are the source from him. So we wouldn't say he's something which exists in existence. We would say that he sources that existence. That would just be the difference.
So he exists. Okay, so he is existence and he exists in the thing that he's the source of.
No, he doesn't exist in the thing he's the source of. He is the thing specifically. He doesn't exist intrinsically to that thing because he is the said thing.
I mean, it's just sounding more incoherent the more you explain it. Like, okay, so if God is existence, let me see. If God is
Well, it would actually be a
existence,
little.
then
Yeah, it would
like
be more incoherent the other way. I'll show you how. Right? If God was intrinsic to existence, that would presuppose that existence is external to God, right? Which would mean that God would be dependent of existence.
I just don't think that like existence is I don't think that existence is like a predicate. I think that it's a quantifier. When you say something exists, you're really just saying there is at least one of those things, right? So like there's at least
Yeah,
one
no,
God
no.
because God
Well,
exists, and
I would be
when he
describing
brings
it as a
things,
predicate here. That's my point.
yeah, I don't know that you
When we
can
say
because
God
it doesn't really
is existence, we're
saying that
using it as
something
as a
exists.
predicate.
Saying that something exists doesn't really even tell you that much about it. Doesn't really. I don't know that it really tells you anything like other than just quantifying. Um, like there is at least one of the thing. I don't really know how it could be
Well,
used
I'll
as
tell
a
you.
predicate.
Yeah, I'll tell you why we would hold to this. We hold this specifically because you would say you're intrinsic to existence. Yes.
Um, if that means that I exist, then
Yeah,
yes.
you're intrinsic to it though. Like you're dependent. So if existence doesn't exist, you don't exist. Yes.
So like to say that existence doesn't exist would mean that it would be the same as saying nothing exists.
Yeah, you
Um,
wouldn't exist then. You would be dependent of that. Yes.
yeah, I don't think it's logically possible, but yeah.
Yeah, so you'd be dependent on existence existing in order to exist. That's basically what I'm saying, right? Like obviously, right? That'd be kind of like a duh, right?
Yeah, for there
So
to
in terms
be
of
at least
God,
one of
right?
something. Yeah.
We wouldn't say that God is dependent on existence to exist. Now, is the proposition true that if existence doesn't exist, he wouldn't exist? Yeah, sure, but that would be within his nature, right? Definitionally speaking, because he is of that existence, right? Because he creates that existence. Without him creating that existence, we can't say there is a creator by which could create that existence. So we wouldn't hold to him being intrinsic to existence. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, I don't. I don't. I feel
A
like
really
I feel like
a really simple way of saying it is that God isn't dependent on existence. Existence would be dependent on God.
okay. So yeah, because I think that because existence is not like a predicate. It was saying that there's at least one of the thing. It just follows if there is something, then it's necessarily the case that that thing exists in some form or fashion.
Yeah, we would just
Even
say
when you
that
have
God
a thought,
is.
that thought conceptually exists at the very least.
Yeah. Well, so like when we make the claim that God is that quantifier, we're just simply stating that He's the source of that quantifier.
Like everything that you can even conceptualize exists in some form or fashion, even if it's just in a conceptual way. I don't think that there's anything
no, I know what you're
that
saying.
like doesn't, so if God, so God is, so are you holding that God is existence or that he's not existence at this point?
I'm holding that He is existence specifically, right? But when I say that, right, it's kind of a confusing way to put it. All I'm saying specifically, like if I'm really specifying on it, that God is the source of existence. We wouldn't hold to Him being intrinsic to existence.
I feel like that's two different things.
What do you mean by that?
Like I would say that the source of the water is the spigot, but like the water is the water. The water's not the spigot.
A better analogy that I was going to give earlier was that the sun begets light, right? The sun definitionally is a sun, but if it doesn't beget the light, can it still be a sun?
They're saying that like the light just necessarily follows from the sun's existence.
Yes. Yeah, because definitionally speaking, it would have to be a sun.
Mhm.
It wouldn't it couldn't be a sun anymore if it didn't exhibit light.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, it just seems like I don't know. It just seems like if that's what you've been saying this whole time, it feels like you're saying the same thing as me. Then, like, it's just kind of trivial to even bring up the
Yeah, that
topic
yeah,
of
I'm saying it's
existence.
trivially. Yeah. I know it's kind of confusing in terms of
Like,
us
God
putting
exists in
it
the
as
same
that
way
way,
we
but
do, as far as like existence itself goes. Like, um, and because he would have been the person or the thing or whatever that to like bring us into existence, then like he would be the source, like how my mom would be the source of my existence directly, you know. So
mhm.
she would exist, so she would have the quantifier existence, and she would bring me into existence, so she'd be the source of existence as well. It feels like that's like the same thing as what you've been saying about God.
Yeah, it's kind of like back to the circular thing you were talking about. We
Because if
wouldn't
you say that
say
like
that God is.
Because if you say that God literally is existence, then there's a whole lot of problems that follow from that. Like then God like would just be all
No,
that
we're not saying in.
exists.
No, we're not saying in relation to every possible, like, or in respect to all forms or all definitions of it. We're just saying that, kind of going back to like what you were saying earlier with your circular thing, right? We would hold to it being a bit circular in terms of God being self evident. The only difference is we just wouldn't hold to him being dependent on himself. We would just say that he is evidently there because something must necessarily exist. But that would be kind of
I
true,
agree that something must
pretty all
necessarily
things.
exist. I think
Yeah,
existence
that would be just
necessarily
kind of the
exists.
point, right? But that would be somewhat circular, you would agree, in terms of, it's an axiom you're going off of. It's something which is self evident, it's assumed.
Um, I, 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 I don't know that I would say it's circular. I just think that it's either grounded in something deeper and metaphysical somehow that I can't possibly comprehend, or it's just like a brute fact.
Yeah, but that right there, like, okay, so for example, logic itself. Would you say logic is something which is, self evident or an axiom?
I take logic to be an axiom, but I don't think it's so obvious for for other people. I think that logic is something that we've discovered, or what rather we've invented. I think we've invented
Hmm.
something like formal logic to accurately
Yeah.
describe the world in the way that it
Yeah, would
works.
you agree that logic itself foundationally is circular as the proof for logic would be using logic itself? You would have to use logic in order to prove logic.
Um, I think it's just I think a better way to put it is that it's like fundamental, it's like foundational. I think that even if you wanted to try to disprove logic, you would have to use logic. So whether you're trying to prove or
Yeah, so
disprove logic, you would have to utilize logic.
it would have to be circular out of the way then, yeah?
I think, well, it kind of. It's just that like even when you try to make an argument for or against logic, you're using logic.
That's kind of
Like it's not
right
like
there. Yeah.
within the syllogism that you'd be positing, it wouldn't necessarily be circular, but by virtue of using like utilizing logic to draw the inference, um, that I think that would I don't know that I would say that's circular. I would say that's like a demonstration that logic is just foundational.
Kind of like that. That's exactly how we would describe God's existence. Is we wouldn't say that it's necessarily circular, right? In terms of we're using God to prove God, right? We would just say foundationally, it would just be necessary.
Right? But the thing is about God is that it's not as obvious as logic is. It's not even like remotely in the same ballpark. I can't escape logic. Even if I wanted to try to like because like we just agreed, whether you try to prove logic or disprove logic, you still utilize logic in order to do so. So
Well,
like
in
it
terms of God, right? If you're trying to disprove God, can you escape ever the fact that there is an uncaused causer?
I don't think that no, I think you can. If there's something that's
You can
uncaused,
escape that?
like I think that there is just a sum total um state of affairs that is just immutable, because I hold a B theory of time, and whatever it is, it's like a static existence. So it wouldn't be caused; it just would necessarily exist. The sum total of all facts would just necessarily exist.
Yeah, so it would be uncaused. It'd be an uncaused causer.
So, no, the causal chain would exist from our perspective. It wouldn't be.
Yeah. Does
It
that
would
causal
be,
change have a beginning though?
I don't think so.
So would infinitely regress?
Yeah, probably, because I think like cause. I think that cause and effect just naturally is like I think cause and effect is just kind of obvious to me. Whenever I see an effect, I'm obviously going to be inquisitive as to, well, what caused this? I think this is why people posit God, because like, well, what caused, the universe to come into existence? Which I think that that's like the wrong question to ask, right? If by universe you mean all of reality, um, because I don't think that like the causal chain is something that can be caused, because causes happen within the causal chain. The causal chain itself wouldn't be a thing that's
Yeah, I
caused.
got you. So are you saying that, well, even then you're still presupposing something which is uncaused, because in terms of it being infinite, is it infinite by nature?
Yeah, I would say so. Because like if you're going to say that the causal chain is
Is
caused,
that
for
because of
instance,
something?
I think that eventually you get to something that's brute, and I don't know what that is.
Oh, yeah, that's fair. Yeah, so you would say that when you get to that thing which is brute, right, or uncaused, right? In terms of substituting that out, like let's say, for example, you wouldn't substitute that for God, obviously, or any sort of theism, right? You would just say it's brute right there, right? Whereas someone who's a theist wouldn't substitute, or would substitute God for, that position, which is, something which is brute, right? We would just hold to kind of how you were saying earlier in terms of logic. You can't escape it, right? In terms of that thing which is brute, it'll never be able to be escaped, right? That brute fact, right? We would just hold to be God specifically. We
But
all have this brute
no,
fact.
but
We have to
with
believe it.
God though, God is personal. God like has a mind. The brute fact doesn't necessarily have to be personal.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't necessarily not have to be personal, right?
I mean, I think that if you posit that it's personal, there's far more assumptions baked in.
There's far more assumptions.
Yeah, because
Yeah, but
I don't know why we would assume that it
are
is.
those?
It could also just be like
Yeah,
it
are
could be
those
shaped like it
assumptions?
could be shaped like a T-Rex. Like we wouldn't assume that, but I mean, it's possible that it could be shaped like a T-Rex. Like it's possible it could be
Yeah, no,
personal.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, I understand what you're saying, right? Are those assumptions though greater than the one big assumption of no assumption at all though?
Oh, what do you mean?
So like for example, right? Would it be more I guess it would be subject to you, right? It would be subject to you, but either way we would still agree on that brute fact, right? But what would seem more plausible, that it's a brute fact by nature, and that the assumption that would have to be found in it being a brute fact would have to be that there's nothing at all, that there's no assumptions to be made. It just is by nature. There is no assumption, there is nothing that we can be assumed by it.
No,
Or would it be more plausible that there is some sort of assumption of where this brute fact actually comes from? It's just not something which is
no,
by nature
absolutely not.
necessarily there.
But no, like as if it's a brute fact, it doesn't come from anything. It's a brute fact. It has no explanation.
Yeah, that's my point, right? So in terms of brute facts, right, where you would say this thing is a brute fact, right? I would say, well, no, I would pack on some assumption to it, that assumption being God, right? Or some sort of explanation for it. So I guess it would just be subject to the mind, or subject to your opinion on whether or not you would find it more plausible that there is an explanation for a what you would call a brute fact, or whether there is no explanation for it at all that exists within, or any proposition that could be true for the existence of said brute fact specifically.
I don't think I followed what you said. It sounded like you asked the same thing again, but I don't think that that's something that you would do. Um, like I don't think that a brute fact has an explanation, but I don't know if that's what you're
Well,
saying.
that's my point. That's kind of my point. So all I'm saying is that what you would call something with no explanation, right? I would call something with explanation, right? So you saying like the universe, it's just a brute fact, right? It has no deeper explanation to it,
Or the
right?
sum
Would you
the
agree
sum
to that
total
statement?
the sum total of all facts is potentially the like
A
brute
brute
fact.
fact.
Right.
Yeah. So like you would say that the sum total of all facts is a brute fact, right? I, as a theist, would
Probably.
find it more plausible that the sum total of all facts has some sort of deeper explanation to it. So that would just be a difference. What's more plausible? That all facts just exist and that everything just so happens to fit logically and everything just so happens to, exist within these three
Well,
laws of
the
logic
thing
and
is
everything just so
that
happens
no,
to
that doesn't
be,
actually make any
you
sense.
know,
Like if the sum total of all facts has a deeper explanation that is not within the sum total of all facts, then it wasn't truly the sum total of all facts. That explanation you're referring to would be included in that sum total of all facts.
well, the explanation itself wouldn't have to hold something which is factual, though. What are you talking about? It wouldn't necessarily have to hold something which is factual.
What? Like the
So, in
explanation
terms
for
of,
the sum total
well,
of
the
all facts
explanation,
wouldn't have
well,
anything
really quickly,
true to it.
this would be within like the personal side, right? The explanation of all facts would go into the relation side. The relation side specifically, we wouldn't say is a objective necessary thing, right? So like in terms of God being tripersonal, right? That thing by which he is tripersonal, his God has opinions. He has wants. He has, these kinds of things, right? Even within his nature of having these things, there are still things which are subject to God. He still has opinions about things. Now, whether or not his mind is, that one which is objective or subjective is different, right? But we would just hold to that explanation being the personal, right? Specifically, the personal wouldn't have to be like some sort of objective fact, right? It would just have to be more something that is, descriptor. It would
Well,
just be
I
a
mean,
descriptor to it.
is it objectively true that God is personal?
Is it objectively true that God is personal?
Yeah.
Uh, Not necessarily, no.
So, like, you think that God might not be personal?
No, I would say it's subject to the mind, right? So personal itself, like how are you defining personal?
I think that you kind of summed it up pretty well earlier, where you're saying like he has opinions, he has thoughts, he has will.
Yeah, so in terms of him having opinions and thoughts and towards will, right? Those things which we're extrapolating, that would be relating to me specifically, right? Or relating to him.
It wouldn't necessarily have to do with you. If God is personal, then he could be personal by himself. Or is that what you're is
Yeah,
that
but
what
that
you're
right
saying?
there, yeah, but that right there would be like those thoughts or opinions, right? Those don't objectively exist, right? Because an opinion is just that, right? It's an opinion. Opinion would have to be subjective. Do you agree?
Well, so an opinion's truth value is subjective, like to the one who's holding the opinion. But
Now,
it's
yeah,
still
yeah,
like
now him, the
objectively
descriptor
true
of,
that the person has opinions.
yeah, no, that's fair. No. I'm talking about just the opinion itself, right? The truth value, as you were putting it, right? We would still hold that subjective. But the opinion itself existing, yeah, I agree with you,
If
would
it's an
be
opinion,
objective.
I mean, I guess it depends on the opinion, because I think your opinion could
So
just
I'm
be.
just saying that personal side would be the explanation. It would be the descriptor we're going off of.
Wait, so when you're talking about, you're saying that like the explanation for the sum total of facts is God's personhood? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. It would actually most align with classical theology specifically because we would say that his personhood, specifically the Son, the incarnate Son, would be the Word by which all things were created through and all things were recreated through.
I don't know how God's personhood has anything to do with the sum total of facts having an explanation. God's personhood
Well,
would just be a
describe
part
why
of the
they're there.
God's personhood would just be a part of the sum total of facts. It would just be a fact that God has personhood if God has personhood.
Well,
If God doesn't have
yeah, but that
personhood, then
right
it would
there
just
would
be a fact that God doesn't have personhood.
yeah, but that right there would bake in the explanation of the sum total of facts. You agree?
No. I
Okay.
don't even know
The
what you
sum
mean.
total of facts. Yeah, for example, so the sum total of facts existing, right? That would be that would be within the sum total of facts. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
Okay, so would it be within the sum total of facts existing that they exist because of God?
Um, if the sum total of facts, if it's true that God exists, then God would be a part of the sum total of facts.
Yeah. So in terms of it being a brute fact, right? When you're saying there's no deeper explanation to it, right? We would just hold that in the same way you would hold there's no deeper explanation to that brute fact of that being which is in the sum total of facts. We would hold to that being true, whether or not God exists or not exists, due to the fact that it would be within the sum total of facts that he exists necessarily. Just like you would say the brute facts exist necessarily.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like an hour over almost. I've definitely got to
I
go to sleep.
apologize for keeping you up, man.
No, it's fine.
I'll see you later,
I
bro.
mean, I stayed because it was a good conversation. Um,
Yeah.
but like, yeah,
Thanks for having it with
let
me,
me
bro.
check on this real quick. So yeah, it looks like I've had you up for almost 2 hours.
It's a
I didn't
long
have
time.
anybody, I didn't have anybody else requesting, and I definitely like, so my stream got kind of nerfed. I got a restriction on Monday, and I got two more tonight for literally no
Oh,
reason. Um, so it affected like the
it's probably the
viewership
M
and
word. I'm telling you, bro.
no, it was because
Pro-
the original one that I got, um I had my friend up and he's 10 years older than me, so I called him old, but I also like said like old ass, and I used like the B word and stuff, so like I think that immediately once I did that, I got a restriction for bullying.
Fair enough. Fair
So I
enough.
think that's what it was, and I don't know what it was today, but I say murder all the time on my lives and nothing
Oh, okay.
happens.
Well,
I say it
I
on
don't know.
some
I
stupid shit.
usually come across lives where they say don't say that. So yeah. But
Right.
yeah, man. Thanks for the conversation. I'll probably throw you a follow. Thanks, bro.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah. Definitely come
maybe
back
come
sometime.
in another time or something. I'll probably watch sometime too. Maybe hear other theist objections to what you're saying. But yeah, thanks, bro.
Sure. Yeah. Have a good night. Yeah, that was a good conversation. Um, and it did go on long because I didn't have other guests and I was genuinely enjoying talking to him. Damn, I don't even remember what his name was. He probably followed me though. Let me see. If I click on this, will it pop up? Anyway, yeah, so yeah, it's got like this mm, it's this restriction has tanked the viewership and tanked the number of guests coming in. So that's why I was talking to him for such a long time. I did do a restart too, and we got up to like sort of normal numbers where I think at one point I touched into 70, which is like not bad. Um, but yeah. Just Jake, but I wasn't talking to just Jake. Was I? The PFP was different. Guys, don't gaslight me. Did I get more views when? Yeah, for a while I was having 3 figures every night. So like, yeah, I don't really know. Since you've been here? Don't know. I was kind of teetering around like the 30 people range, but ever since I got that restriction, it's been like nothing. But it's all right. I mean, I've definitely like overcome restrictions in the past, so hopefully it won't take too long to build it back up in the algorithm. But anyway, I'll see you guys next week, probably Monday. Um, I try to do Monday through Thursday, and I usually end up skipping one of those days. I don't like plan on doing it. It'll just be like either, man, I really don't want to do it today, um, or I'll be like actually way too tired because of like staying up too late the previous night streaming to like have the like the cognition to stream again the next night. Oh yeah, anyway, I am gonna hit the sack. Gonna beat this sack up. Good night, everybody. See you next time.